I mean, teach me how to do
Teach you how to do it?
it. Teach me how to do
I can't.
it. That's what I've been sitting here listening to.
Well, the thing is,
I'm in.
I'll teach you how to do it.
Okay.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. All the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden in Christ. You cannot know anything at all unless you start with God. You say you know to be true that my argument is not valid. Can you tell me, sir, how you know that to be true?
Because through multiple years of experience, through everything that I have observed in life, and through what others have observed, and compiling this knowledge, and applying the scientific method, and applying the other things of logic, and all of this, I can bring this together and make a claim that what you're saying is not correct and valid in relation to all of this other evidence.
If I walk up there and I were to blast you in the face with my right hand, instantly your eyes would fill with tears, blood would pour, and it would be very real to you.
It doesn't work.
That's not what I'm saying.
You're saying that I can't be certain of anything because it's based on my own reasoning. But you can't be certain God exists because you reading the Bible is based on your own reasoning.
You just said I can have certainty, right?
I can say you have certainty if you know God exists.
Right.
But the fact that you think God exists is based on your own reasoning.
So nobody can have certainty?
Nobody can have certainty.
Are you certain of that?
And I'm certain of it.
I was talking to a great friend of mine, and the first thing I said to him was the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And we were talking about 6 hours about this apologetic, and the light finally went on, and his eyes went wide open, and he said, I get it. They can't know anything unless they start with God. I said, man, that's the first thing I told you. All right, now, what I'm talking about today is apologetics. That's a reasoned defense of your faith. That's what apologetics is. Now, why do you think unbelievers don't like evidence for the existence of God?
They don't like God.
Because they're unbelievers. That's right. Christians, we love the evidence for the existence of God. Why is that? Because we're Christians. That's right. And this is a question that I ask people because I'm sure most of you, all their lives, like myself, when an unbeliever came up to me and said, I really don't believe that God exists, I'd say, oh, really? Well, here's some evidence.
Personally, I think it's far more logical to draw conclusions based on the evidence. Let's not believe in the authority of the Bible merely because the Bible claims to be true. Let's look at modern cosmology, physics, biochemistry, and genetics, all of which point powerfully toward a supernatural creator who looks suspiciously like the God of the Bible.
Atheism or Christianity? That is for each of us to decide on the basis of the evidence, of course.
But we're going to show, through two scientific arguments and one philosophical argument, that there's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator out there, and we're not going to use the Bible to show you that evidence. We're just going to give you evidence and let you see where it leads.
Out in the world, where do you hear evidence most often? In court. Who do you give evidence to in court? The judge and the jury. So we go out in the street, in a campus, with some arrogant, snot-nosed kids like that, and they say, I don't believe in God. And what's the first thing we do? We give them evidence. And when we give them evidence, who are we saying is the judge? Them. And who is on trial? God. Wow. So we go out in the street and we say, you, sir, are the judge. The Lord of glory is on trial. Wow. What does Scripture say? Do not put the Lord your God to the test. And what are we doing? We're out there saying that God's on trial.
That's right. Huh.
And you know what the problem with that is? You can win that court case because God has given us wonderful evidences. Evidences are a wonderful gift from God for Christians to bolster our faith. You can win that court case and you can acquit God. But what's the problem? Who's the judge?
Okay, so you believe in proof.
Yes.
Now, proof presupposes truth, logic, and knowledge, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now what is truth in your worldview?
Truth is what has been accepted and what has been tested.
Truth, so would you agree that truth is factual? Truth is whatever's real?
Yes.
So you have a correspondence theory of truth. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. Correct?
Yes.
How do you know what's real?
I know what's real by what is tested and what is accepted over and over and over again.
Okay.
Throughout time and through scientific measures and through the scientific theory.
Okay. Now, in order to come to those truth claims, you're employing your reasoning, correct?
To an extent, but I'm also employing the reasonings of thousands of other men.
But in order
who existed.
to interpret what those thousands of other people say, you're employing your reasoning.
Yes.
Okay, so truth, you know through your reasoning, right?
That's his truth. Along with.
All right, but the thing is, you have to reason about what other people say. My question to you, sir, is how do you know your reasoning's valid?
I don't.
That's right. So if you don't know your reasoning's valid, would it not follow that you can't know anything to be true?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the problem.
But doesn't it is it the same for you? Do you not know anything to be true?
No. What I'm saying is you do know things to be true. To deny truth, to deny knowledge is a logical fallacy.
We know things to be true in our own realm. Like you said, what is real?
Well, this is the question, sir. Could you be wrong about everything you claim to know?
Yes.
Okay, now here's the problem with that, because when you say you could be wrong about everything you claim to know, you've given up knowledge. And I'm going to explain that to you. Let's say I asked you how tall this building was. And you says it's 50 feet tall, but I could be wrong. Do you know it?
No.
Not if you could be wrong.
Correct.
So if you could be wrong about everything you claim to know, it follows that you know nothing.
Yes.
But the problem is you do know things.
No, I don't think so. The only thing I do know is that I know nothing.
Do you know that?
Yeah.
That's two. You know that you're at this university. Do you know that you're studying?
No. I'm dreaming.
That's right, you could be dreaming.
Yeah.
So unless you start, I'm going to explain to you why, unless you start with God, you can't know anything at all. But you do know things. You're spending big money to be at a university to study things. The cop pulls you over and rolls down the window. You say, I don't know if you exist, sir. I'm not gonna pay the fine or whatever. You don't live like that. Hang on, this guy's having a very good conversation. If you please not interrupt. What I'm gonna say is, unless you start with God, hang on, unless you start with God, you can't know anything. Because in order to know anything at all, you would have to know everything. Because if you don't know everything, what you don't know could contradict what you think you know.
But
does that make sense to you?
It does. But can't the argument be posed in the same way that you're talking about God?
Well, we'll get to that in just a minute, okay? And I'm glad to answer your question. You're reasoning very well, sir. So in order to know anything, you would have to know everything, right? Or have revelation from someone who does. That's the Christian worldview. God has revealed truth to us in His Word such that we can know it for certain. Because you know things for certain. Do you know why you know things for certain? Because you know that God exists. And that's what the Bible says. People don't go to hell for denying what they don't know. They go to hell for their sin against the God they do know. And I expose that people know God when they make knowledge claims that they can't account for without Him.
Is that a Bible understanding?
Yeah.
See, that's the problem. See, Jesus Christ did not only die to save souls for eternity, He died to save reasoning now. Because if you say I could be wrong about everything I claim to know, I say, could you be wrong about that? It's the absurdity, and that's the option. You have God or absurdity. But people choose absurdity because they love their sin.
Well, imagine somebody came up to you and said, I don't believe in words. We'd think that they were a fool. We wouldn't believe them, and we wouldn't take out our dictionary and give them evidence. But if somebody came up to you and said, I don't believe in God, we believe them, we give them evidence, and we don't think they're a fool. When the Bible calls them fools, something has gone wrong. I mean, listen to the Bible verses. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of His hands. It doesn't say the heavens proclaim the glory of God if He exists. You know, and in Romans chapter 8, Paul says, I'm convinced that nothing can separate me from the love of the Father. What a beautiful verse. I mean, you see people in church, tears streaming down their face. Nothing can separate me from the love of the Father. What comfort that is. And the next day, they go out, they talk to people at work, and they say, you know, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You know, that's a nice conversation with the guy at work. It bolsters his unbelief. It bolsters his denial of the God he knows exists. But it's not the God that I believe in. Mm-hmm. It's not the God that they were worshiping in church the day before. But they give him Pascal's wager. I could be wrong. But if I'm wrong, I die rotting the ground, worms in my body. I'm right, I get to go to heaven. If you're wrong, you go to hell. Mm-hmm. If you're right, you die rotting the ground, worms in your body. What have you got to lose, man? What have you got to lose? But you know what? God is not a bet. He's not even a good bet. He's not even the best bet. He's the certain God that has proclaimed Himself certainly. And when we say that to the unbeliever, we're talking about something we don't believe in. We're talking about a different God that we worshiped in church the day before. Most of my life when I was defending my faith, I was doing it wrong. I was giving evidences to the unbeliever. The problem is, most Christians are doing it wrong today. I mean, look at the books that we have. 20 compelling evidences that God exists. The Case for Christ. A handbook of Christian evidences. Evidence for God. Evidence that demands a verdict. Who's the judge in this case? Not the creator of the universe, the unbeliever. These people know that God exists, so instead of believing what the Bible says, we believe them when they say that they don't believe that God exists. We elevate them to the position of judge and we put God on trial. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. Now, according to that verse, who needs proof that God exists?
No one.
Nobody. Nobody. And what do we do when we go out into the world? We try and prove that God exists to people.
Personally, I think it's far more logical to draw conclusions based on the evidence.
That is for each of us to decide on the basis of the evidence, of course.
We're just going to give you evidence and let you see where it leads.
This has been drilled into our heads for so long that we believe the unbeliever over the Word of God.
That's true.
And the problem is that I'm going to tell all of you this today. And tomorrow, you're going to go out and the guy's going to say, I don't believe in God. How do you know that God exists? And you're going to say, every building needs a builder. God is not a builder. God is not a builder. He's the builder. And they know it, and they're without excuse for denying it. That's the God that we believe in. The other day, I felt my heart beating in my chest. And I thought to myself, I have a pump in my chest about the size of my fist, made of meat. It pumps 700,000 gallons of blood per year and runs for 90 years on donuts. And I got to prove that God exists? Evidence for God? Look around. I don't have to give you evidence for God. You know that God exists. That's the God we have to talk about when we defend our faith.
I'm saying that this is the perfect time to open their life to give it a chance. I'd say give them a 60-day trial.
Is that?
Yeah, 60-day trial. 60-day trial.
Sounds like the book of the month.
See if it'll change your life. I dare you.
Are you kidding me? Who in Scripture tried Jesus? Pontius Pilate. And he only tried him for a few hours. If Pontius Pilate didn't repent, he's in hell. Try the Lord of glory? We've got to get on our knees and submit to him.
I can't comprehend the concept of only one way to God for one simple reason. There are still people in this world who will never hear it. Village in India.
Right.
Who may never hear of Christianity except perhaps as a term.
Right.
It makes no sense to me that a loving God would condemn them to hell for not believing in Jesus when they never heard of it.
Well, I've got some good news for you. Nobody goes to hell for not believing in Jesus.
Okay.
Hallelujah, right? Do you know why people go to hell? Because of their sin.
Okay.
Those people in those tribes in the deepest, darkest jungles are sinning against the God they know exists.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we send missionaries, because they're going to hell for their sin against the God they know exists. If they didn't know, sending missionaries would be the worst thing we could do for them. We should have wall building teams to build walls around these communities. But the Bible says that everybody knows that God exists and are without excuse for their sin against him. Even people that profess an other God know the true God. Because they're not going to be able to say, oh, I thought it was Allah. No, guess I was wrong. No, you know the true God that exists, even you.
Now the thing is, at this point, people are saying, well, I was convinced, I was converted because of evidence. Does that mean I'm not a Christian? No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that at all. God can take a bent stick and strike a straight blow. God can save people through evidences, but I'm really afraid of people who say that they're Christians because of the evidence. Christians because of the evidence. Because if you're a Christian because of the evidence, then you're not a Christian. Because you know what could happen? If you have evidences to convince you that God exists and you're a Christian because of the evidence, you're still the judge. And the problem with that is the next day you can back over your 3-year-old kid who's playing in the driveway. Kill them. Now all of a sudden you got evidence that there's no God. And the scales are going back and forth and back and forth. Ooh, now I'm not so sure that I'm a Christian anymore. I'm not so sure about that. And then you give them some more evidence. Oh, now I'm a Christian again. Then they watch a Richard Dawkins video and it's going back this way. But what's the problem? Who's holding the scale? The unbeliever. The unbeliever is judging God based on the evidence. They've never submitted and bowed the knee to Jesus Christ. When the Bible calls the unbeliever a fool, it's not a judgment on their intellect, it's a moral charge. These people are willfully rejecting the God they know exists. My father, he worked at an electronics firm, and he had some Russians come to visit him, and these were people from backwoods Russia. They were having a break, and this Russian fellow wanted a cup of tea. So my father got him some boiling water and got him a tea bag, and the Russian fellow took the tea bag and he went to rip it and pour it into his tea, and my father says, no, you throw the whole thing in. So the guy thought it was kind of weird, looked at my dad. But he wanted some sugar for his tea as well, so my father got him a sugar bag. And he took it and he threw it in his tea. And my father says, no, you rip it open and you pour it in. And the guy looked at my father as if he was crazy. Now, would that guy be a fool? No. He didn't know any better. A fool is someone who knows better. Who did Jesus call the fool? The builder who built his house on the sand. You think that guy didn't know better? He probably wanted beachfront property and didn't care what would happen to his house. That's the person who the scriptures call a fool. That's who we're dealing with.
Right. I live in the world of I don't know.
That's right. You know that you live in that world.
I know for a fact that I live in that world.
See, now that's not a world of I don't know. That's I know I live in that world. See, that's contradictory.
That's contradictory. That's you're good. You're really all right. That's a good point.
So you do believe in the standard of truth then?
I do believe in that, but I don't believe any human can come to a specific conclusion about that because we're all stuck with yes, that is true.
Okay, but you've come to a conclusion about that.
The one truth that I know is that no single person can synthesize and know for certain whatever it is they say that they're knowing.
Okay, so you know
they can have more or less evidence.
So you know that nobody can know anything. You know that for certain.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a certain knowledge claim. Now let me ask you this question. In order to come to that certain knowledge claim, are you employing your reasoning?
Yes.
Okay, now let me ask you this question. How do you know your reasoning about anything is valid?
Because it's based off of other things. So when you start from a base thing that you can't contest with, there's one thing to speculate, but I can look down, and I know I'm looking down because I perform the action of looking down.
So what you're doing is you're telling me that you know your reasoning is valid by using your reasoning.
I'm using evidence to come up with a way of reasoning.
Right, but the thing is, I'm asking you how you know your reasoning is valid. And you're using your reasoning.
Because it's not my opinion, it's what is and what isn't.
Okay,
it has nothing
true?
to do with what I think.
Is that true?
Yes.
But you told me you only know one thing true, and that's people don't know anything, and now you're making another truth claim.
But there's more evidence that what I'm saying is true.
Is it true that there's more evidence?
Yes.
See, now that's another truth claim.
But
see, that's three now.
See, now you're using the same word to constitute different things. You're saying that truth is...
Is that true?
What I... Yes.
See, that's the difficulty.
Well, because Scripture says, do not answer the fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. And I say, well, look, take a look at my debates, you know. That tells us how not to answer the fool. Do not answer the fool, lest you be like him. But you know what I do in my debates? I answer him according to his folly. When somebody says to me, there is no certainty, I say, are you certain about that? You see what I did there? I answered him according to his folly, so that he doesn't get all puffed up, so he's not wise in his own eyes. And they say, why didn't God tell us that? He told us how not to answer the fool. In Proverbs 26:4, don't answer the fool according to his folly. Why didn't he tell us how to answer the fool? Why didn't he tell us to answer the fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes? Wait a minute. That sounds familiar. That verse is in the Bible too. Somewhere in Malachi, right? Somewhere, you know, Malachi or in Habakkuk, some, you know, one of those other books, you know, that you got to really find out. He says how to not to answer the fool, but somewhere deep hidden in the Bible, somewhere is how to answer the fool. No. Proverbs 26, verse 5. The very next verse, answer the fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Before I understood this apologetic, I never understood those two verses. But this makes perfect sense. Don't answer him according to his folly. Don't assume that God doesn't exist. Oh, you don't believe in God? How can you make sense of anything? You say there is no certainty. Are you certain of that? What I've learned in teaching apologetics is that the error that people make is they're either defending God wrong or they're defending the wrong God. Scripture tells us there's only one God. So if you're defending the wrong God, you're not defending the God of the Bible. I mean, you can look at our arguments. We use the cosmological argument. Say that everything which begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore it must have a cause. It must be an uncaused cause, and that uncaused cause is God. We use all these books and have all these arguments to try and reason to God. We have arguments that conclude God. God is not a God that we can reason to. He's the God that we can't reason without. Proverbs 1 verse 7 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Paul in Colossians 2 says, in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Why do you think Paul told us that? He tells us in the very next verse. I tell you this so no one may deceive you by fine-sounding arguments. What do we have? Fine-sounding arguments. This is Paul's warning to Timothy. Guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. What is false knowledge? See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the basic principles of this world, rather than on Christ. That's what we're doing. What's the most famous apologetic verse? 1 Peter 3:15. Always be prepared to give a defense of your faith. People always forget the beginning of that verse. But set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give a defense of your faith. That's what we have to get back to. We don't conclude God, we start with God, and we show them that if you don't start with God, your worldview is absurd.
Hey there.
Finally, I was waiting for you, man.
Yeah, I was just hanging out. I didn't know anyone was back there, and then I lost connection, so just having some connection issues. Welcome. How you doing? You want to talk a little bit about atheism, you were saying?
I hear a kind of echo on your side, but no, yeah, I'm not an atheist. I will point that out right away from the.
Am I still echoing?
You're good now, but yeah, it seemed like you're echoing the dialogue. No, I don't consider myself to be an atheist. No,
Yeah.
you're not.
What do you consider yourself? What do you consider yourself?
I have come to identify with the term perennial philosophy or perennialist. Man, you kind of are still echoing the chat. Yeah.
Let me check here something. I'm not echoing on the playback, so it might just be on your end. I don't know if you want to pop out and then pop back in. Maybe that will help.
I'm checking. Let me see. All right. I do hear an echo. I'm closing everything I have. I'm not too sure what's causing that.
I don't know.
You know what? I'm gonna mute myself to see if it's me. If I mute myself and I still hear the echo, then obviously it's on your end.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and try that. And I'll speak a bit here. Yeah, just wondering where you're coming from or what your position is. We can start there. You still hear an echo from me?
No, you're right. It was me. All right. I apologize.
It's not you, it's me.
No. I think I corrected it right there. It was a hidden app behind. I'm on a Chromebook, and I'm not too sure why I didn't find that. I mean, I'm very well versed in, computers. Like I know how to build websites and all this stuff, and I'm surprised that I overlooked that. I apologize for that.
No, it's fine. What kind of position are you coming from?
I consider myself a perennialist.
I've heard the term, but you're going to have to refamiliarize me with it.
Sure. A perennialist is someone who adheres to the perennial philosophy. And it's a perspective on the world's major religions. So, I mean, that's the main emphasis there, that it's a perspective. It's not like a religion or a syncretism or, it's not a doctrine. It's a perception, if you will, that sees all the major religions as having one underlying metaphysical source from which they all spring forth from. And
what source is that?
Mysticism is the emphasis in perennial philosophy. So, it's mysticism, obviously, a lot of people might consider it esoteric or what have you, but there is legitimate neuroscientific studies that study mystical experience, that see these things as a natural phenomenon in consciousness. And so mysticism might involve deep states of meditation, contemplation, even perhaps near-death experience, states of a stroke, like in the case of Joe Poe Taylor, or even you could say psychedelics, like a high-dose psychedelic experience. And so, but they all kind of equate to one and the same thing. And there are various pathways to get to that various, that one universal state of consciousness, if you will. That's kind of a starting point. I guess I could leave at. If you have any more questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like a generalized starting point, but a non-specific starting point as well. I tend to focus on the starting point on precepts.
No, so do I. And, I just didn't want to, speak on and on and on. I wanted to give you an opportunity to chime in. That's the starting point. So basically, I suppose you could put it that there's a certain transformation of consciousness that could be attained by various fashions, whether you're meditating or you're having a near-death experience or you're taking a very high dose of a psychedelic. These are all various ways to represent one and the same phenomenon that occurs at the height of what these mystics might call a mystical experience, spiritual experience. It's like a spectrum. For instance, I called the other day to the line with Aaron Ra and to discuss near-death experience. And he tried to clump them all in a kind of box where, if you have a near-death experience, it's necessarily going to be characterized by the cultural context that you grew up in. So if you're a Christian, you might see Christ on the cross. If you're a Muslim, you might see Muhammad. If you're a Buddhist, you might see Gautama, and so on and so forth. And I made the criticism that I'm like, hey man, they're not seen solely in this fashion. That on a lighter spectrum, yes, you may see experiences that are unique to the individual. But if you go towards a higher spectrum of these experiences, these more profound NDEs that occur, you no longer have this unique cultural reference point. Yeah, now it becomes something more universal, more akin to what psychologists might call ego death. It seems to be more of a universal phenomenon in consciousness. And, I guess I can leave it right there. I don't want to, just be a talk.
Yeah, that's fine. The thing about Aaron Ra is he starts with something like, if you can't show it, you don't know it. Some empirical stance, right?
Sure. Yeah. And I was trying to refute that,
Well, it's easy to refute because how's he going to show that philosophy?
Well, he was trying to say, this is very recent. This is like a few days ago, literally.
I'm saying, look, it's pretty simple. If you can't show it, you don't know it. That's a philosophy that he brings forth. So how is he going to show that philosophy to be true?
No. I'm on the same page with you. I agree with you that Aaron Ra cannot produce evidence for his claims. I agree.
He can't even get off the ground with his philosophy.
To offer an example, he tried to say, the reason I called in was because I got challenged by one of the mods in the chat. And the guy that was speaking while we were having this discussion in the chat, his name was Jake. And it was the last appearance that Aaron Ra made on this show. And he tried to say that, he tried to tell Jake, the caller, the theist that was calling in, hey man, Susan Blackmore is one of the senior researchers on these projects, and she's given up all this stuff, and therefore a lot of the enterprise of scientific study into NDEs has been abandoned. And that's obviously not the case. So with my call, I called in with all the current research that's going on with NDEs to show Aaron Ra, or I'm sorry, he corrected me on his name. It's not Aaron, it's Aaron. Aaron Ra, I showed Aaron Ra that, hey man, there's multiple studies going on around the world conducting research into NDEs. And so to say that they've given up on this enterprise is, it's a false pretense. You're absolutely wrong about this. Like you're propagating false information. And yeah, so it developed from there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no, I agree with you. I'm a theist myself. I'm not an atheist.
Yeah. Well,
But go ahead.
Basically, when I'm talking to anybody, I like to know what their most fundamental presupposition is.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's the main point. I think you're getting straight to the point with that.
Right. So what is yours?
Yeah. So I think with the perennial philosophy, it's trying to say that there is a fundamental metaphysical truth that underlies all the world's major religions. And it's only that when you get to the core of these major religions in mysticism, that you see these parallels, so that, the Holy Spirit of Christianity, or Samadhi of Hinduism, or Nirvana of Buddhism, or Fana of Islam, or the Sufi mystics are essentially saying one and the same thing. They're all referencing in their own various ways throughout epochs and different cultures and different times what neuroscientists today might call a mystical experience. They're not really straying away from that. And that was the point that I was trying to make to him. And, I don't see any fault in that. I mean, it's heavily studied within neuroscience. I don't know if you've looked into it yourself, but, the so-called mystical experience after the term William James established, they're not talking about something that defies the laws of physics, as many atheists might be confused with. They're not talking about magic in that sort of sense. They're talking about a very natural phenomenon that occurs, across cross-cultural, across, all the major religions, that they can find these similarities at the very core. And that's essentially what I attempt to argue for as a perennialist. And I believe that's what the perennial philosophy represents.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got a clear presupposition out of that.
Ask away, man. I will gladly try to make it clear.
Well, it's the same question. What is your most fundamental presupposition? You're going into a story about how there's studies being done that there's similarities between all the world's religions. It's not really giving me your understanding.
The fundamental aspect is that there's one fundamental truth, single, and the mystics recognize this as a unity, as a oneness. The mystics throughout the ages have said, the one with reality, or one with the universe. That fundamental aspect of truth, which is metaphysical, is underlying all the world's major religions in such a way that they all spring forth from that point.
Well, that's a theory about how there's an interconnectivity in different religious experiences, but
Sure.
It's not giving me your
Well, I mean, I adhere to that.
Your understanding or your particular.
If you're looking for
supposition,
by particular, are you thinking that I should adhere to one religion over the other?
Well, if I continue to question you, we will find that you do have a worldview, as all people do.
Sure.
And that worldview entails potential series of presuppositions, and then we can draw back to an ultimate presupposition. Like we could find
I agree.
We could find common ground and say that we presuppose logic and the classical laws of logic and laws of language in order to have
Well,
this
then question
discussion.
me closely. I'm willing to submit to your examination.
Right. So we could agree that in this conversation itself, thus far, we're both presupposing logic, right?
Yes, of course.
So, okay.
By logic, you're talking about the law of excluded middle and so forth, and yeah, the very basic laws of logic. I agree. Continue.
Right. So when I'm talking to most anybody, theist or atheist, we agree on that much and say, well, yes, we're presupposing logic. And then the next step is the epistemic justification, the knowledge of how we come to using that logic and acquiring that logic and holding true belief in that logic, not just necessarily presupposing it, but having something in place that makes that logic possible. And I would call that an absolute, that we rely on the absolute of logic. And then I would refer to my ultimate presupposition being the Christian God. So I would move to ask you what your epistemic criteria is for utilizing the presupposition of logic.
Okay, fine. We can talk about the law of excluded middle, law of non-contradiction, law of identity, and so forth. When you bring up when you bring up the notion of the absolute within philosophy, I guess what I'm essentially saying is that it's not exclusive to Christianity, that the absolute is something that's recognized by all the world's major religions, but they refer to it by various names. So while in Christianity it may be referred to as the Father or the Holy Spirit, the Buddhists might likewise recognize it as nirvana. The Hindus might likewise recognize it as samadhi. And so from the vantage point of perennial philosophy, they see it as completely synonymous.
Well, there's variations in the teachings, though. Like when you have Hindu teaching, say the absolute and the relative realms, or the absolute realm, they can't make distinctions in their teaching.
Sure. And I could point out, I can ask you, what do you mean by the absolute? And I understand that's something very difficult to put into words, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. I would say that there's a transcendent creator, that God transcends human beings. We have knowledge through God that we can obtain because it's made known to us. Though we don't have all knowledge of God, we do have certain knowledge, and those include absolutes, which include morality and logic.
I absolutely agree.
But you don't have the same teachings, let's say, in the Hindu and Buddhist traditions. You might have conceptual similarities as you speak, but you don't have the same teaching. So you're going to.
I agree that there may be nuances, but nevertheless,
but they're key. They're not just nuances; they're key. When you coming from a standpoint of the Christian God with a transcendental argument for God, we have knowledge because it's given to us by God, the Creator. You don't have that same.
Would you be able to give an example?
Well, I use the transcendental argument for God.
You see, but I could use the same, argument are you familiar with perennial philosophy at all?
Well, yeah, I am actually. When you bring it forth, I do understand the concept. But you can try to posit in any God, but it doesn't actually flow the same way.
I'm not sure that it completely depicts the perennial philosophy. I don't think it's saying any.
It doesn't matter. What I'm pointing out is if you have use of what you're calling an absolute and utilizing logic, I'm ultimately asking you. I'm saying that the Christian God of the Bible is the reason that we can utilize absolutes, including logic and morality, and we depend on them in our daily life. For you to say that, well, you can posit in any God in that position and make it work, That's what I'd be challenging, how you would do that, because you can try to do that. I've had people try to do that, but it doesn't work the same way. It doesn't have the same explanatory power.
How so?
What's that?
I said, how so? Like,
Because of the teachings, like you don't have the same explanation in say the Hindu teachings as you do in the Christian doctrine.
How would, if you had to put in words to define the absolute, how would you do it? And again, like I said, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to come to some kind of either a consensus or some way we can relate to each other.
The absolute being God, the creator, the absolute knowledge, which we have access to.
Those are very vague descriptions. I'm asking for a little bit something more concrete, like something more detailed than that.
Where is it?
You can answer that if you want to. That wasn't my question, but if you want to go in that direction, I wouldn't mind.
I don't have a location. I think it transcends space and time. The same with the immaterial concepts of logic and morality. These concepts would transcend space and time, but they would be accessible to us to different degrees.
And I would agree with you there. A physicist might call that non-locality. Non-locality meaning that it's not here, it's not there, it's not inside or outside, it's everywhere.
Well, a physicist wouldn't really be in the realm of morality.
No, it wouldn't. But what I'm trying to do is trying to get closer to a point of expressing this in such a way that we can relate to each other. If you're going to be vague and ambiguous, there's no way we can try to come to some type of consensus amongst one another. Not that consensus is the goal, but we have to relate to some point to understand where each one of us is coming from.
Right, and I've given my position. I'm coming from a position of the Christian God and the transcendental argument for God's existence, which is actually the preconditions. The Christian God provides the preconditions necessary for the absolute immaterial concepts of logic and morality. That's my position. So whereas I've given my position, it would be necessary for you to either try to refute that, which your epistemic criteria is going to come into question, or give your position, because your position doesn't seem to be.
I don't think we're at opposed to each other. If anything, the more I try to attempt to explain my position, it would be more aligned to exactly what you're talking about.
Well, your position seems to be any and all positions, so I would try to move into a particular.
No, that's
you don't see that. Okay. Who is God?
Who is God?
Sure.
See, okay, questions like this can clarify. I don't think there's a particular who that is God.
And where did you get that knowledge?
I really believe that within the spectrum of Christianity, theology, which is the study of the nature of the divine,
You're telling me where you got that knowledge claim right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
The study of the nature of the divine, even within Christianity, comes through direct experience, which the Christians refer to as the direct revelation of the Holy Spirit.
So you're saying you don't have a doctrine, you just have a spiritual view that you yourself.
Yes, experiential. Yeah, I'm not saying something that's devised from something that was willy-nilly made from or derived from something intellectual. It can come from no other place than the Holy Spirit. That's the only way to discern the theology of the religion, the nature of God, the nature of the divine. You don't discern the nature of the divine by using your rational intellect and thinking your way to how you should assume God should be. It should come through, like the scripture says, revelation.
Right, but you're appealing to the scripture, but you're also appealing to world religions as well.
Yes, and the reason I do that is because I don't think it's exclusive to Christianity. I really believe that what the Christian mystics refer to as the direct revelation of the Holy Spirit is essentially synonymous with what the Buddhists were calling nirvana, what the Hindus were calling samadhi. It's just simply that they were expressing these truths in various epochs and throughout the sands of time that we reside in. Like you may not believe in evolution. I don't know if you hold a literal.
The problem with your theory, though, is the Christian God speaks of only one God, and all else is idol worship. So, from my worldview perspective, I can understand what you're saying to a degree, but it's not coherent with my worldview. So I'm going to move to ask you what your epistemic justification is. And this is where you get into issues with mystics and Gnostics. Okay. They say they don't require epistemic justification.
Yeah.
It's a feel or experience, and that's vague and ambiguous. And what's going to happen is you're going to fall into the category of arbitrariness, and you're going to have an ad hoc explanation at a presuppositional level. That's where your problem is going to be. And it's going to continue to be the same problem. The conversation is going to always lead back here.
I've heard that many times over.
But you didn't solve it.
Well, no. I don't think it's necessarily something that has to be solved because
right.
If you look into all the world's major religions, they essentially say the same thing. That
no, they look. Buddha and Jesus Christ don't agree. All right, Muslims and Christians don't agree fundamentally.
Have you read the Quran?
I have not read the Quran, but I know that Jesus is just considered a very wise prophet, and the Christian scriptures say that in the Trinitarian view that he is fully God and fully man. That's a complete fundamental variation.
I want to tell you that I study comparative religion as a hobby. I don't look into just one religion. I look into all the world's major religions. And if you, for instance,
you understand what I'm saying, right? They don't fly. They don't.
No. I get what you're saying. I've come across this many times over.
Right. So for you to say that they're all one, you've got conflicts within.
I understand that. I completely understand that. If you look into the Quran, you may have no interest to do so, but if you go to Google and you look up Surah 318 in the Quran, Al-Irman verse 18, it will say something very similar in that the verse, it says, Allah witnesses that there is no deity except him. And so the angels accept that knowledge, maintaining that there is no deity except him. So you can only exalt that religion. This is you can find this in every major religion, not just Christianity. You can find that you should only worship this religion above any other religion.
Right, and you're saying that within the scriptures and the explanations that singularity or that particular is part of the problem. They're all talking about the same thing.
Yes. What I'm saying is that they're essentially talking about the same thing. And I agree with the religion.
Your access to that knowledge is what's always going to come into question. And your answer is going to be vague, ambiguous, arbitrary. That's going to be, it's going to be the ongoing problem here in your stance. You're not going to have a justification for that.
Very good. I accept that. And
there's no real argument then. You don't actually have a real argument.
No. What I've noticed is that the only people who have that pushback are people who haven't had these direct revelations.
Right. I can't argue with someone who says, you know what, I've got specialized knowledge, esoteric knowledge, a direct divine revelation from the one source. You're right. I can't argue against that. All I have to say to that is I don't believe you, or you can't. I fundamentally disagree with you. So you don't really have an argument, you have a persuasive experience that you can try to
Yes.
influence people with.
Yeah, and your response is the most logical. It's the natural response to that. Yes, I mean you should do that. If you weren't going to make that argument, then you wouldn't be rational. And so
the point that I'm making is that I don't spend too much time with this particular stance because of that, because you can never really get anywhere except spending time with someone and letting them allow them to influence you.
Yes. And trust me, my friend, you're always going to find that. You're never going to convince anyone through words alone. You know, that's why
I'm not saying that you need, that's not what I'm saying, that through words alone, you'll convince somebody. I'm saying in your particular position, there is no justification. So this is how we communicate. We're going to communicate with words and language and concepts.
Sure.
But you with your position, you can have conceptually it's sort of an appeal to, or an ever-moving goalpost, if you will. Like you can
say that.
Well, it can kind of equate to that because you have no actual standard.
Well, that's why.
I would probably go into ethics with you, try to get into ethics and find that
I wouldn't mind.
But you're going to be some sort of relativist ultimately, right?
No, I'm not.
So you believe that objective morals exist?
I do. Yes.
And how do they exist, or where do they come from?
Well, I mean, since you haven't really delved into comparative religion, I'll address Christianity.
No, I want you to see. This is key too. This is why I don't want you to move around. I want you to come from your worldview position always. That's how I would communicate with another person. It's my worldview communicating with your worldview.
Well, I mean, in my view, I can approach it from any vantage point like that because I've studied all the world's major religions, so I don't have no problem.
What I'm saying is, you're trying to somewhat take an illusory position of neutrality, is what this is breaking down to. You're going to say, "Oh, I can give you morality and ethics from the Hindu perspective and the Christian perspective. Which one do you choose?" I'm saying I want your worldview, and I want epistemic justification from your worldview.
Okay. But see, the point you're missing is that
that's always what I'm driving at.
All right, fine. But I think that is my view, that I can address it from that vantage point and I can approach it that way, so that if we're going to talk about the morality of Christianity, I would bring up the notion of original sin. Have you ever deeply looked into?
I think you're giving the impression that you're listening to what I'm saying, and then you're moving back right into your original point.
Okay, well, if that's your criticism, then elaborate. I will.
I'm trying to say I don't want you to appeal to Christianity to talk about morality and ethics.
Well, why would I appeal to Hinduism if you've not really studied it?
I want your worldview. I don't want to get into a didactic conversation about different religions. I want your worldview, is what I'm saying.
And I can give you my worldview, but why go into something that you haven't even studied? You know,
because I want to listen to your worldview compared to my worldview and go from there.
And the reason I chose Christianity is because that's the best way I can relate to you, since you have you're most knowledgeable about that religion.
No, you're not listening to me, or you're not absorbing what I'm saying for some reason.
I'm gonna listen, man. I'll shut up.
No, I mean you sound reasonable enough. I just think that you know what you're doing and you want to keep doing it, and I'm not trying to
one up you. If that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that I think you have a certain methodology where you know how to move around different religions from studying different religions. That's fine. But in this particular conversation with this particular person, I like to focus on.
I don't have any particular methodology. That's the point.
Right. So that's the thing. You don't have any epistemic justification for your claims. You just keep moving around.
I do have that.
Okay.
I just don't
talk
like.
more about your epistemic criteria and justification for your claim.
Are you familiar with Manichaeism?
No.
Then why would I even try to put it forth in the form of Manichaeism or Egyptian religion or Greek philosophy or Taoism if you've not really looked into that? Like I would
Then
have.
You're trying to.
No, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just trying to
do anything. Okay, so you're not trying to do anything, is your claim?
Yeah, I'm trying to relate to you in the best way I can.
Okay, so now you are trying to do something. Which one is it?
That's the only thing. I want to relate to you so that we can have a more fruitful discussion about.
No, but my name is JG, by the way.
Say it again. I didn't hear that.
JG. What is your name?
My name is Jimmy, but I still didn't hear what you said.
JG.
JG?
I put on the screen there. Yeah.
Okay, JG. All right. I'll address you. So, go ahead.
Or Jimmy.
I'm willing to listen to you.
You keep saying that.
Cafe or cafe, either is fine. Go ahead.
Cafe. Okay. So I think I understand what you're telling me. What I'm trying to do with you is I'm not trying to get into dialectics, right? Where we can find agreements on different perspectives religiously. That's not what I'm doing here.
Sure, I can tell. You've been very calm throughout. Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to take my worldview and compare it to your worldview. It's not about appealing to my worldview. I'm looking for your ultimate presupposition, and I'm looking for epistemic justification.
Yeah, and I told you from the very jump out of the gates what that was. I said I adhere to the perennial philosophy. I'm a perennialist.
Yeah, but that's not a presupposition.
Is it not?
Your ultimate presupposition is what? You're giving me a term.
Have you heard of the perennial philosophy prior to this discussion?
Yeah, I've heard of the concept that all the religions are united.
Okay, yeah, and you
I'm
have
asking for your fundamental presupposition for the utility of universal abstractions like logic and morality.
Okay,
you don't have that. You've already stated you don't have that. So that's what I'm saying. The conversation is
no. I respect your approach. Are you familiar with the Golden Rule?
Yeah, of course. Sermon on the Mount.
Yes, and you know that the Golden Rule is cross-cultural. It doesn't just simply apply to Christianity.
Right.
Yes. So, so there's this anchor in morality amongst the world major religions that today has developed this modern term, Golden Rule. And, it refers to a morality that is non-judgmental, that it's the Greeks described it as agape, the infinite unconditional love that's ever forgiving, so on and so forth. I would say that is the basis, the anchor of a morality that can be discerned and threaded through all the world's major religions, whether you're talking about the ahimsa of Hinduism or the compassion of the Buddhists or the agape of the Christians, so on and so forth. That's essentially what I'm attempting to get at, but it may take some time. I understand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would go to Romans 12:9. Love must be genuine, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. So there is part of love that is not accepting everything. It's actually combating or hating what is evil. And also in your worldview, what is good and evil? Again, what is the justification for that? Because appealing to every religion is not going to work. But
I can elaborate if you'd like.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the reason I'm enamored by the perennial philosophy, it does emphasize mysticism. Mystics speak of a phenomenon in consciousness, which they call, I'm pretty sure you've heard, unity or oneness.
You're just telling me stories.
No, let me finish.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you've heard those cliches, right? Like, unity, oneness, and so forth. So from the vantage point of the perennial philosophy, there is, let's take, because you're most familiar with Christianity, if you don't mind, I want to address it. Let's take the notion of original sin. And, from a mystic's vantage point, the original sin could be seen as the original division that you have in your mind. So, most people, and we put it in a modern sense, they perceive themselves as a bodily entity roaming an environment. So they make this contrast between their cells and the rest of nature, right? And so you have this distinction in your everyday waking normal reality that everyone experiences. But for the mystic, that subject-object dichotomy collapses and they experience a complete unity. And so, if we're referring to the morality of the Christian mystics, they see this division to give permission for every sin, so that if you want to rape someone, you want to murder someone, you want to commit theft, this and that, you can only do that if you have the perception that you're a bodily entity separate from the rest of nature. And for the Christian mystic that engages this contemplative state where they see a unity, no such thing can happen. You can no longer have murder or rape or sin. You have a basis, you have an anchor for morality, because you see all things as an ultimate whole, as an integration.
But when you're in the ultimate whole, you're also saying there's distinction in order to make that claim.
No, see, that's what people get confused by, I think, because you can't make that distinction inside that phenomenon. You can only make it when you're looking at it from the outside and contemplating it.
So when are you inside of that phenomenon? At what times?
When the subject-object dichotomy collapses.
And when is that?
That is at the very height of a mystical experience. It's the very core of mysticism.
And how often do you experience that?
I've only glimpsed it maybe 2 or 3 times in my whole life.
So you feel that there's something, a oneness that exists, yet you live as a particular, making distinctions.
Yes, but it's not exclusive to me. It's been going on since time immemorial, throughout the ages. It's something that you could potentially experience. And
now you're making claims of other people's experiences. That's an even further distinction.
Yeah, I am. I will say that. But
how can you do that?
I don't sense it in you, man. I don't sense it in you.
Well, no, I don't care about what you sense. I'm saying on your worldview, how can you make a claim like that? You can't justify. You really can't. I think you can't actually justify anything you're saying. You're floating around as a sort of agnostic. Really, is what you're doing.
Well, okay, it's kind of like this:
2 places at once and not make a claim to any particular.
What's the
being in a particular?
Let me put it this way: Have you ever been skydiving before? What's the thing that really jumped you out of your pants that you experienced yourself? Have you ever had a near-death experience?
So let's get back to something a little bit more.
No, wait, please. Let me finish with this. Answer the question. If you've never skydived or had a near-death experience, then of course you're not going to be able to relate to someone who's
good. I can't relate to that stuff. So
right?
Back to something I can relate.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is that
you have specialized knowledge that I can't yet understand.
It's not specialized, man. It's in
you. Of course it is. Your position's going to be.
No.
Your position's going to be. Look,
I don't
laid it out as best I can, but you just don't. You don't have the.
I don't think it's specialized because you have the potential to experience it. You may have not had it in your lifetime. Maybe up to this point you haven't had it, but that doesn't mean you're incapable.
Cafe, I'm not buying what you're selling, Cafe.
And I'm not trying to sell you this.
No, you are. You definitely are, because you're not trying to. You're trying not to take. First of all,
I have nothing to sell, my brother.
Of course you do. First of all, you're not taking a position. That's the problem here. You're not taking a position.
But you're
saying perennialist, but you're not taking an actual position. You're saying I take all the positions.
But I'm not the only person that has done this throughout history.
It doesn't matter. We're not talking about other people. We're talking about you and your worldview.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I'm not. I have nothing to sell.
Yeah, I know exactly.
And what I'm saying is this is my experience. This has been my life.
I'm not asking you about your life experience, though. I'm asking about your. I was asking you as we started the conversation for your fundamental presuppositions, your epistemic justification, and you're going into a story of all the world and all the experiences and your experiences and all this mystical nonsense.
Because I don't believe it to be
a particular.
It's not exclusive to myself. That's why.
You don't speak for other people's experiences.
And I'm not trying to.
Yes, you are. You already tried to.
No.
Yes.
See, I mean, if you want to continue to strawman in that fashion, that's fine.
It's not a strawman. If you go back and listen to it, you did try to do that. Now you're saying I'm not trying to do that.
What I'm trying to tell you is that I don't believe it to be exclusive to myself. Good. And I think it's quite obvious that it's been happening throughout the ages. And
what is it?
This so-called what modern neuroscientists might call mystical experience.
So you're just talking about generalized experiences of other people throughout time and currently.
No. I think you're interpreting that way because you haven't had it in yourself.
Yeah.
See, if you had it in yourself, then you would recognize it right away, and you wouldn't be arguing with me here.
Hopefully, I'll get there, Cafe. Right?
I hope so too, man.
So let's try to get back to something a little more concrete.
Go ahead.
So when you said there are objective morals.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what one is.
If there is a background like cosmic consciousness that represents this ultimate, complete, infinite,
now you're going into a speculative idea. You're not giving.
No, I'm not.
You started with if there is.
Okay, I mean, I say if because you haven't experienced it.
Okay, let me ask you the question again. You claim there are objective morals. Correct?
Okay. Yeah, I could put it like this.
Stop there. Tell me one of them.
I could put it like this. I instead of saying if, I could say like in the background of the universe exists a mind that possesses omniscience, omnibenevolence, infinite love, so on and so forth. And the only people who glimpse this are the people who have these temporary glimpses inside deep meditation, near-death experiences, high-dose psychedelics, so on and so forth.
And where did you get this knowledge?
By having one of these experiences for myself.
Okay. So you have a personal revelation of why objective morality may exist. So what?
I really believe that that's the background behind all that exists. Like, you know, like we're the beacons of truth.
We're not talking about all that exists so much as the claim of an objective moral existing and what that particular objective moral is. And then you're just going into this mystical explanation.
Okay. I mean, I could try a different approach. Like, I appreciate the discussion.
Just tell me what one of those objective morals is. That's all I'm asking. I don't want you to go.
Infinite love, man. Infinite love.
Infinite love
Yes.
as an objective moral.
Yes. Infinite love that's not judgmental.
So this love doesn't judge children being raped. It says, you know what? That's just part of the process. We don't judge that.
Yeah, it's an infinite love that's non-judgmental.
So it doesn't judge children being raped?
No, from that vantage point, no, it doesn't.
What vantage point?
From the vantage point of cosmic or ultimate consciousness,
Okay.
It doesn't.
You're just basically saying things. You're saying, okay, the objective moral is a potential infinite cosmic love that doesn't judge children being raped.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So basically, in your worldview perspective, rape, killing, murder, stealing may or may not be wrong. It's just a matter of where you are and what you're experiencing.
No. What I'm saying is that
you didn't get that right.
No, what I'm saying is that lays in the background at all times. It's always there. And
what is always there?
That infinite love is always there.
Okay, the infinite love.
Yeah.
Always exists.
Yeah, it always exists. It's always there in the background, and anyone can glimpse it. And so someone who commits rape, when they are confronted with it, then they, in contrast, go into a world of guilt.
And what if they don't?
If they don't, then they're in complete denial of it.
And what if they're in denial?
Then, yeah, it's very possible for people to be.
Okay, so there's really no distinction of right and wrong. It's just
no, there is.
Okay, what is the distinction?
The distinction is that if they're able to deny it, like, remember, that's the eternal sin. You know, if you
now you're appealing to Christianity.
Yes, I am.
I'm not. You're not a Christian.
I am a perennialist, and I adhere. I can invoke any religion.
Right. You can just float around where you want and say what you want.
No, not in float. I don't think it.
I'm just a term I'm using for what you're doing. You're floating around wherever you want to and say, you know what, it's all love, it's all good. And
I don't think of it as a flotation device, but okay.
I'm talking about a figurative float, like a philosophical float. You're not grounded. Your philosophy and your worldview are not grounded. So you when you get into conversation,
in infinite love.
Yes, but your infinite love doesn't have any distinctions.
What do you mean by distinctions?
You're saying it's all good.
Of course.
Yeah, you're saying rape and murder is good.
No, I never.
Wait. Let me retract. Because now you try to break it up into distinctions. You see what I'm saying? You go to this oneness, and then all of a sudden there's distinctions when something comes along.
No,
that you don't.
I'm saying when you do commit sin, then you're.
What is sin? What is sin on your worldview? I'm not asking about the Christian worldview. What is sin on your worldview?
Okay. You know, since you asked my worldview and you don't.
Well, that's what we're looking. Hey, Cafe. That's what we've been looking for the whole time. Your worldview, not an.
I won't even invoke
not an educational experience of all the world's religions, and you're just floating around telling me about it.
Okay.
I want your worldview because I think that you exist in this world and that you know things.
When I was going through this journey, studying all this stuff, I came across Ramana Maharshi, and they asked him the question. They said, you know, how should we treat the other? And his response was to say, there is no others. Oh. And I thought that was a perfect response, you know?
Yeah. It sure isn't.
If it's truly all one, then, you know, obviously there is no others.
Who said that?
Ramana Maharshi.
So how did he gather that distinction if he's part of the one?
Through this discernment in this phenomenon I've been trying to emphasize of mystical experience, or, you know, this spiritual experience, or this direct revelation of the Holy Spirit, if you will, or the samadhi of Hinduism,
or whatever you want to say and put in place of it. If we want to call good evil and evil good, that's fine too. It's all up to you.
Sure.
Right.
It's all one and the same thing.
There's no anything. There's no actual distinctions. It's just whatever you want to say.
No, it's
whatever you want to think and believe.
No. Okay.
Let
me be a bit more specific. It's a collapse of the subject-object dichotomy that we all experience in our everyday reality. So right now,
we all experience this?
No.
Okay. Oh, we don't all experience this.
Let me finish. So, you know, in our everyday waking consciousness, we have this impression that we're a subject-object dichotomy, you know, interacting with the world. So right now you look at a screen, you're listening to me, and you perceive yourself to be this, you know, egoic entity from the rest of reality that you perceive, right? And for the mystic, no such thing takes place. That collapses. There is no subject-object dichotomy. That subject-object dichotomy is transcended in such a way that everything is, in a very literal sense, from that vantage point, one. It's a oneness. There is no subject. There is no object. It's all one thing. So the mystic no longer identifies with the material body. They see their identification in all things because that's the perception they have from the vantage point of this spiritual or mystical experience. And that's the vantage point which I argue from. That's what makes me so passionate about these topics, because I experienced that for myself. I may not have it right now in my ordinary state of consciousness, because if you address me, you say, hey, Kefe, I will say what? You know, because my ego is still there. But I glimpsed a state where that no longer is. And I've only had a glimpse. The mystics reside there.
Why did you call up Aaron Ra and argue with him? He's where he's supposed to be.
Well, to be honest, there was someone in the chat room, a moderator, that challenged me to call in, and I was like, you think what? You think I'm not gonna call in? Like, fuck, of course I'll call in. I'll call in, and Aaron Ra tried to say that when you die, you die. That's it. Like consciousness blinks out, and my argument was like, hey, Aaron, I'm sorry, Aaron, have you died and you've been resurrected to come back to tell me that there's no nothing that happens after death with your consciousness? Where's the evidence for that? Where's the peer-reviewed studies? And he got triggered by that, and it resulted in him saying, hey, you know what? I want to invite a professional on my channel, a neuroscientist, and I want you to be a part of that. And he invited me to be a part of that, and that's going to happen.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it ended up being a kind of good thing. I'm like, shit, if I can hang out with Aaron and a neuroscientist, that'd be badass. I would love to talk to a neuroscientist about these topics.
Yeah, it's a good point, because the neuroscientist is not going to know the answer to that either.
Yeah, there is none. There is no definitive evidence that when your body decays and dies, that consciousness blinks out. There is no definitive evidence for that. And I was trying to point that out to Aaron Ra, and he was denying that. He was saying that, no, we do have it. We do have it. I'm like, well, shit, well, point it out to me, man. Show me the peer-reviewed study. I'll gladly read it. And of course, I never got a response.
Yeah. He's got to hire the specialist to take care of those for you.
And so what I'm trying to say is, man, I'm ultimately on your side, dude.
No, you're not, though, because
maybe not. Maybe
you're not on any side. The problem is you're not on any side. You're just you're taking a pretend.
You want to put it that way.
Position.
Nevertheless,
you got the mystic is just.
Have you
pretending not to have a pretending not to have?
Can I ask you, JG?
Yeah.
Have you glimpsed infinite and unconditional love?
Yeah.
Okay, once you glimpse that, you can never have a grudge against anyone, brother. I love you to death.
I disagree.
I love you to death, man. You don't even know how much I love you, dude.
You can have a glimpse of love, but when it comes to somebody violating someone you love, that's a righteous judgment. You don't. Love says, you know what? I'm not going to let evil take over my family. That's part of love that people
Fair
miss.
enough, man. And have I been disrespectful to you? Have I cursed at you? Have I raised?
No. I'm trying to make a point here. The mystic, because I talk a lot to universalists. They have the same problem. They're borrowing from Hinduism. They're pretending all is one. It's all linked. It's all the same thing, but then
I didn't have to invoke Hinduism. I could have invoked Taoism. I could have invoked Manichaeism, Greek philosophy. Are you familiar with Plotinus? Are you familiar with Plotinus' notion of the one? Probably not.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's the same kind of idea.
All right, man. I still love
it. The distinctions, like people who talk about the one and we're all one, they also talk about distinctions. It's contradictory. And then they say, "Oh, well, those are separate realms that you visit. You're in the one."
Let me ask you something.
you don't recognize it.
You've seen the image of a yin yang, right?
Right.
You've seen how it one side looks white, one side looks black, right?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a complete, like almost like it's fighting against each other, right? Like it's like you can't make a distinction. What would you call that? Would you call the yin yang in its full circle a unity?
No.
So you think it's ultimately some kind of separation?
I think it can't make the distinction it wants to. It can't explain itself.
Okay.
Just the same as you. You're not really explaining yourself. You haven't really given a worldview. But you're saying hold on. You're kind of saying like you're beyond this. But you want to have the conversation also.
No, man. I'm trying to tell you that you can't have yin without the yang, and you can't have yang without the yin.
Where did you get that knowledge?
From Taoism.
From where?
Taoism.
Okay, so you got the knowledge from a religion.
No,
that you don't.
I didn't get it from religion, man. I got it from direct experience. As I've been trying to tell you, mystical experience, direct revelation. You know,
right.
You can't have
specialized knowledge. That
you can't have yin without the yang, and you can't have.
You know it because you know it.
It is an intuitive apprehension.
You enter an arena where you want to have a discussion. You say, "Well, here's my explanation. I know it because I know it." And that's that. That's it.
And you want to enter an arena in your explanation that you always have to undermine anything else that you don't mean like someone presents to you.
Not necessarily. It's more like studying people's worldviews and taking.
And have you studied Taoism?
Let me finish, dude.
All right.
It's like studying different worldviews. And then taking a worldview and taking a stance and say, yeah, this is my worldview, and I'll argue it against your worldview. And then you realize that most of these worldviews, Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, these oneness worldviews can't make the distinctions to make arguments, but they still try.
They're not trying to make distinctions, though.
You are trying to make distinctions.
How so?
Because you're saying there's a oneness, but you're also separate from it. Even if you're not trying to do that, you ultimately are doing that.
How so?
Because you're cafe, you're you. You're separate. You're not oneness. You're saying it exists and we're all together, but we're obviously not united. There's many ways to go about.
May I attempt, before you get bored with me, man, may I attempt one more metaphor with you?
Yeah.
I might have to work on this one because I'm not too sure if you're familiar with it. Are you familiar with the block universe or McTaggart's B theory of time?
No, I've heard it, but I'm not familiar with it.
All right. Well, the block universe was a notion proposed by Albert Einstein. And for him, he didn't see the universe as something that was occurring in the limited space of our perception. So like the moment of the Big Bang all the way to the supposed fate of the universe. And a lot of physicists argue over what's the fate of the universe. It could be a big freeze where all the stars burn out and it just becomes cold. And another scenario is like the big bounce where everything collapses back into the singularity. So it goes back into like a kind of a black hole, and it exits out a white hole, and it all starts over again. But for the sake of argument, let's consider the big bounce.
Great.
All right, like the universe is ongoing. The energy of the atoms is eternal, and so that you have the Big Bang and you have the singularity at the very end, and then it just so the collapse at the very end represents another Big Bang, and adds so on infinitum, so that you have infinite universes going on and on and on. So when you consider that, So if you consider a lot of physicists like to use the analogy of a foam. So, the foam is, characterized by all these bubbles. Each bubble represents a single universe within that foam. And so for Einstein, the foam from the universe are like if you can consider our universe, from the moment of the Big Bang to the moment of the Big Crunch, the supposed fated end of the universe, is all already completed in a higher dimension. It's already done. Like you and I conversation here, it's already happened, So he called it the block universe.
Yeah, I do feel like that's true about this conversation.
Okay. And so I suppose, so like when a mystic talks about unity, they no longer identify with the material body. In a sense, they kind of see the whole totality from the block universe itself.
They want to.
You can say they want to, but let's say this is the case for the sake of argument. Let's say this is the case. And so like they don't have an identity in their material body. This is why they don't fear death, because they've seen the end in a certain sense. They've seen what happens, they have access to the entire block universe because their identity is the block universe. Their consciousness is that block universe. And so they can't identify as some kind of individual entity within that block, because that the very finite algorithms that happens, that is the mystic from birth to the grave, they just see it as an inevitable piece and structure, part of a totality that is the block universe. Do you kind of see what I'm saying? And they, that's where their identity lies. They no longer see themselves as the material body.
How they're being themselves. They're having experience.
Yeah, they now identify with the block itself. Like they see from the vantage point of the block, and so like from the block, everything is done. Like I said, it's all future and past is collapsed into the moment. They're not worried about the future. They're not worried about the past because it's already all there.
Yeah, in the moment, they're not.
Yes, but this is the point I'm trying to get at, that inside this phenomenon, this is what people invariably express, whether they're atheists or religious. Like if they're atheists, because I follow these studies very closely. And if they're atheists, they may not reach for religious vocabulary. They may say, like, it felt as though I was able to glimpse into a higher dimension, or it was beyond dimensionality. Like this is the kind of language they reach for.
The problem with all of this is very interesting. The problem with all of it is you're smuggling in causality, meaning, value, teleology. You don't have those things.
No. I would say you're smuggling in causality.
I mean, on my worldview, there's a reason, there's a justification for this.
Yeah, but within the
block, you're smuggling it in.
But you're forgetting that there is no causality in the block. It's already there. There is no causality.
Yeah.
So I would say that you're smuggling in causality.
I don't take the block philosophy as my worldview. That's why.
I'm not trying to tell you to take it that way. I'm trying to say.
I'm telling you that's why. I'm not smuggling. I'm staying.
Yeah, okay, that's fine,
consistent
man.
with my worldview.
I'm just saying, consider this idea.
You're missing what I'm saying, Cafe.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. If I am, I apologize.
You're talking about the block. And then you're in and out of the block. And then you're going in, smuggling in causality and meaning and value within the conversation. You don't have justification for those things. It's the same thing that I started with.
No, I think causality is irrelevant in relative to the block.
You can say that, but you're also assuming that causality exists still. You see?
No, I'm saying it doesn't exist.
Okay, so there's no causality.
Yeah, there's no causality.
So when you see things happen in your life, you're like,
it's all part of the block.
Yeah.
It's all part of the block.
But you don't live. The problem is you don't live that way.
I mean, I don't think any one of us can.
No,
Because
see,
we
don't appeal to everyone. Stay local. You don't
Okay.
live that. You don't live that way. So you don't live anywhere near.
I don't, but I would submit that most
You
people
don't live in your philosophy. Is my point.
Sure, but
Your
what I'm
philosophy
saying is that
just
mystics
way out there. It's way out there somewhere.
It
And
is.
You're like, you know what? The block is here, but I don't live at all like I'm in the block. But it's there, and it's everything. It's one.
But you
life,
would,
bro.
but you see, like if you really follow it to its core, like this is why philosophy exists. You know, philosophy.
There you go again. There you go again. Telling me why philosophy exists. That's a causal.
No. What I'm trying to say is that
causal claim, Cafe.
Well, hear me out real quick. Like you wouldn't want to know. You know, like if you knew everything right now, if you're omniscient, there would be no reason for me to speak. You would know everything that was.
That's where you think you are, or you visited, or you're going. But you're still here talking to people.
No. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm inviting you to just consider this notion. That's it. Just play with the idea.
Yeah. No, I have played with this idea. Not not by the specific terms, maybe the perennial.
Okay. Well, if you play with it, if you were omniscient and you knew every aspect of every notion of every particle of reality, there would be no reason for me to speak.
It's called what you're doing is called idol worship. In my worldview, you're worshiping this self or the consciousness or the ability to have this mystical experiencing, and you're not attributing it to any actual higher order. It's just a mystical order that you think exists.
No, I told you I was a perennialist.
Right, it's a form of. So in my worldview, it's a form of idol worship.
I don't see it that way.
As a perennialist, you wouldn't. But you don't really have any concrete claims as a perennialist. Anything goes.
No, I disagree, man.
Okay, make a concrete claim.
I don't see it that way because
make a concrete claim.
Okay, well, give me a chance. I don't see it that way because I really believe it's a metaphysical truth that we all can glimpse, including yourself. Maybe you haven't had it. Maybe you haven't had something that you might call a mystical spiritual experience.
So your concrete claim is I've had an experience that you may or may not have had.
I mean, that's part of it. I wouldn't say that's the entirety of the.
Well, please finish it.
It's not the entirety of what I'm trying to say, but
claim is my point. You're making another mystical claim.
No, what I'm trying to say is that it's been going on for millennia, since time immemorial, and it can be recognized in all the world's major religions, like
according to a belief system that you've been revealed, according to you.
If you want to say that, man, go ahead.
Well, I think that you're saying it, and I'm just pitching it back to you.
And you're welcome to it, man. You're welcome to.
Okay, so we're just going in a circle. You're saying that. That's the way you're saying it. And I'm saying it that way. You're not really saying. You're not really saying anything concrete. Is the point?
The metaphysical truth, right?
The metaphysical truth, which is derived from the knowledge of your particular experience that you attribute to the possibility of other people experiencing.
I'll say it this way. You heard me say earlier the notion that the physicist addresses with the foam, where each bubble is a universe, right? What the perennialist is trying to say is that underlying all the bubbles is every single permutation, every single possibility that could ever manifest in any single bubble.
And I'm asking how you would have such knowledge, and you're just saying from a revelation and a personal experience.
Yeah, through revelation.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. So anybody can do what you're doing. Anybody can say what you're saying.
So. I
it's not it's not a real argument. Is my point. You're saying I've had a revelation that A, B, and C exist. They always have. They always will. We're part of the block. One love. There's no right and wrong. Even though we might claim.
I never said there's no right and wrong.
I know. I'm just saying you can say any claim you want and not really refute it as a mysticist, right?
I think it's very specific.
What are you going to refute as a mysticist? How are you going to say someone is wrong in their view as a mysticist?
if you experience the entire spectrum, you know, like you're no longer.
What does that mean?
You're no longer traversing one particular scenario in a
If
single
you've
bubble.
experienced the entire spectrum, you're just saying things that sound fluffy.
Well, I mean, you don't let me finish, man.
It's because I'm stopping you to see if you realize what you're saying. You're not saying anything.
I'm okay. Let me try
if
to say
you've
it.
experienced the entire spectrum, that doesn't mean anything.
Can I finish? So, like, let's say, you know, if you accept this notion, like, of the bubbles, right? So, like, you might have a universe where Hitler won the war, or the comet never hit and dinosaurs lived, and you know there was never any humans. You know, you can have all these trajectories that come about, and you know there may be a universe that goes this way, a universe that goes that way, where humans never are to be, or dinosaurs never are to be, and the universe may end in that bubble, but nevertheless, underlying that entire spectrum is all the possibilities that could manifest
according to you.
And yes, and so like so you have whether it's Hitler that won the war or lost the war, the whole point of, I think, of perennialism is saying that the underlying grid, the underlying spectrum represents all permutations. It represents every aspect of Hitler that could have possibly manifested, or the dinosaurs.
That's fine. You can say that. You can't justify it. Except
I think it's justified in that experience.
So your justification is that you think it's justified.
No, my justification is that when people undergo that phenomenon, this is what they invariably express.
Yeah, so you have justification of what all people may or may not experience. That's your justification for your knowledge.
You want to come over to my fucking house and try some DMT, man?
No, I think that's kind of what you sound like. You sound like someone who's kind of gone out there with psychedelics and experienced some wild things, but you can't bring it back. You can't harness what you're experiencing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I can't prove it unless I fucking dose you with the heroic dose.
No, I don't. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who actually claim a worldview and stick to it. There's a certain amount of truth and courage to taking on a worldview and standing with a worldview that says there are right. Hold on. Where there's right and wrong, and there's good and evil, and we can't just make that what we want it to be. That there's things that we ought not to do and should not do to others, and that doesn't change. It's stagnant in a way. And I look for people who are living in that reality, not in a reality where like it's all good, it's all love, bro. Like I think that's bullshit. And all I've gotten from you, you said some interesting things. I've been listening. I've been trying to listen to you, but really, you can't justify anything in a conversation. You're just saying, well, there's just experience, bro. It's just what.
But I never claimed that it could be justified through.
Well, that's a problem in argumentation. It
is a problem.
Discussion, right? So I look for people who are wanting to have a discussion and debate, saying, I have a stance, I have a position.
Yeah, but you're not going to find anyone like that.
There's all sorts of people that do that. What are you talking about?
No, I'm saying like you're not going to be convinced intellectually. Like people can be the most articulate and the most advanced with the way they wordify these experiences. But the problem is that this phenomenon is ultimately experiential. Like you can't think your way into a mystery.
No, I'm not looking. I'm not looking to be linguistically or logically convinced necessarily. That's going to be the.
Then what are you looking for?
I'm looking for people who are able to justify their spirituality or their mysticism.
And then what?
Then they have ground to stand,
and then you'll give them merit from there.
Oh yes, in some respect. Yes.
I doubt that. I really doubt that.
Why do you doubt that?
I mean, because just bring up your biggest criticism, and I'll try to refute it, and we'll see it.
I already have, and you don't even know what it is. That's the problem, because you're not listening, apparently. I asked for
And, you know, I can make
I
the
asked
same
your
case,
ultimate
too.
presupposition and your epistemic justification, and you have neither in your worldview. You have fluffy
Yeah,
mysticism.
but I
and
could say the
personal
exact same to you. Like, hey, you haven't listened to me.
now you're getting desperate, right? You're trying to do the reversal.
No, I'm not. I'm perfectly
If you
calm.
don't have it, then bring it up, you know, in the forefront. Say, I don't have those things.
I just told you, like,
yeah, okay, good. So you're saying you can do the same thing to me, and what is that same thing that you can do?
I told you that I'm not going to convince you with words alone. That it's
You're not
something
going to convince me. It's like, dude, I can't convince you. Try this DMT. That's not. I'm not going to do that either. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you don't have to try DMT, man. You can
No, but that's the type of philosopher you are. You're like,
you can practice
dude,
meditation. You know, you can practice contemplation. You can have a near-death experience.
You're engaging in conversation and logic and language, and then when you get challenged on the epistemic criteria and the presuppositions, you abandon it and say, dude, it's experience, dude.
No, I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not abandoning it.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
saying that it's
you're saying it can't be done alone because you can't justify what you're saying.
If you can pinpoint like a very specific argument, I'll address it. But no,
what is your most fundamental presupposition, Cafe?
That would be it. That it's experiential.
What is?
You know what I mean? That this metaphysical truth is something that you have to approach.
What metaphysical truth?
This truth that the mystics have glimpsed throughout the ages. It's something that's only approached through, you know, direct experience. It's not something they approach through their intellect. It's not something they think their way to.
So why don't you tell me what you think? Why don't you tell me what you think a fundamental or ultimate presupposition is? Because I don't think your answer is reaching it.
A fundamental presupposition,
like your ultimate presupposition.
I was trying to say it earlier that this notion of the divine that comes out of this is, you know, it represents all permutations. You know what I mean? Like if you look at a field of grass,
I don't know what you're saying.
If you look at a field of grass, you know, you couldn't count every grass blade, you know, in an acre of grass, or every leaf on a tree.
So your ultimate presupposition is there's too much grass to count. I think I got it.
No. I'm saying that when mystics enter this state, then there is a certain omniscience that manifests. And suddenly you are aware of every single grass blade in the multiverse.
It's not an ultimate presupposition. You're just telling me a story of an experience.
Yeah, because I mean,
you need to look. You need to explore the idea of what I'm asking you, maybe, and come back and talk about it a little bit if you want to, because I think I don't grasp your total perspective, of course, but what I'm saying is I grasp the idea of your worldview, and it's all over the place. That's why I'm trying to hone in on justification and presupposition.
No, I respect your approach, man. I've enjoyed the conversation. You know, if I didn't, I probably would have, you know, left a long time ago. But I mean, you've been very patient. You've been, you know, if you were Matt Dillahunty, you would have hung up on my ass a long time ago.
Well, Dillahunty is a good example, right? Dillahunty and Jay Dyer, for example, he gets him down to this level. He says, okay, Matt, we both agree that we presuppose logic, the utilization of logic. And he says, yes. And he says, okay, well, tell me as an atheist materialist what your justification is for presupposing this invariant immaterial concept abstraction known as logic. And what does Matt Dillahunty say? He says, it just is.
Yeah.
Dyer says, well, that's the problem. When we bring you back as far as we can to your fundamental presupposition, you're saying it just is. In other words, he has an arbitrary starting point.
Yeah, but I mean, you can do the same thing in a different direction. Like if you ask Matt Dillahunty, what evidence would convince you of God? He would say like, I don't know, but if there is a God, then God should know. You know, like it's the same.
No, that's not the same thing. It isn't the same thing.
The
problem with Matt Dillahunty doing that is he can, when you give him the go on his little game where you have to convince him, He can move the goalpost wherever he wants to,
And that's exactly what he does right there.
So that's why you don't play that game. That's why I'm bringing up Jay Dyer saying, let's get to the common ground of our fundamental presuppositions. And we've gotten as far as utilizing logic, this abstract, immaterial, invariant concept that we both use and utilize in language.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
How do you justify that?
Yeah.
That, right? And he's arbitrary. So that's a logical fallacy at his fundamental approach to the world. He's arbitrary, and it was a great point by Jay Dyer. And Matt Dillahunt, he just said, "Well, I guess I'm a fool."
Yeah, I agree with you there.
But this is where I'm trying to go in conversations, where I've been trying to go with you, and I can't get there. But I know your position well enough now to know that you don't have an answer for this as a mystic.
I say that again. I didn't hear that.
As a mystic, a perennialist, as you say, you don't have a justification for this.
Well, I mean, the justification in perennialism is that fundamental experience that occurs that has been occurring.
No. See, when you get into the fundamental presupposition to say experience, that entails a slew of philosophy.
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with presuppositions.
Listen, though. Of course it does. In the experience itself, you're presupposing all sorts of philosophies. When we do science, right, empiricism, we do empirical experiments and demonstrations, right? This is what atheists say. I presuppose science. What does science presuppose? It presupposes uniformity in nature. It presupposes identity over time. It assumes induction.
Yeah, no, I see that.
So that's why you go to the presuppositions to figure out where people are actually coming from. And
the reason I can't really identify with the presuppositions is because, the phenomenon is like something that occurs in intuition. It's not something that that's brought about by the intellect. It's not something that's presupposed. It
doesn't stand on its own. They're interconnected. If you have an intuition, there's all sorts of things that go into that, because the intuition happens and then things follow, right? Things that are presupposed follow into the extraction of where you take that and how you interpret that intuition, right? You're presupposing things that are brought in to the intuition after the intuition happens. That's the point of tracing back the presuppositions.
All right. Let me ask you this, man. And I'll let you go, man, because I don't know if you're getting tired or not. But are you familiar with Aldous Huxley's Mind at Large?
Which one?
Aldous Huxley had this idea in his book, The Doors of Perception, which he called the mind at large. And he proposed that our minds right now, as you sit there talking to me, that your mind is necessarily filtering out reality. And when you engage these so-called mystical experiences, this is when you glimpse an area of consciousness that is removed by those filters. So you have kind of like, if you will, a higher bandwidth of reality. Like, in other words, like your mind kind of merges with a background higher mind that exists behind it. Another way to put it is like, if you look up Google Images, like brain cell / universe, you'll see a neuron, but you'll see clusters of galaxies that resemble a neuron.
Yeah, the macro to the micro.
Yeah, macro to micro. Yeah, so like this fractal scale. And so like a lot of mystics will describe this phenomenon as like the macro merging into that, the micro merging into the macro.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. The point in this conversation, though, is that your ultimate presupposition is the same as Matt Dillahunt's. It just is. And if you want to come back and try to refute that or explore that more, you're welcome.
Well, I'm trying to see where you get that at, because I've actually had discussions with Matt Dillanti.
You haven't had presuppositional discussions with him.
Man, dude, he invited me. I called into the Atheist Experience. The show is like 2 hours long, dude. I spent like half like an hour of that show. It's very rare when a caller takes up half the show. So he was trying to address my shit. And at the very end, he let me list all the criteria for mystical experience that's used in the professional studies. And, he got triggered at the very end because I told him, hey, man, a majority of atheists that sign up at Johns Hopkins, they no longer are able to identify with atheism any longer. And why don't you sign up? And boom, he hung up on me. Yeah. And when that happened, his co-host was Phil Session that day. And he turned to Phil Session and they went through the 6 criteria. And neither one of them could identify with a single one. To me, that was clear proof that they've never had this type of experience. Yeah. And, I can link you to that episode, man. I don't mind. But
yeah, that's cool. I'm not going to buy into the argument like, bro, you've got to experience what I've experienced, bro, as a fundamental worldview. It doesn't work.
Me neither. I don't think that's the argument either.
I don't know, Cafe. It's pretty much what you're saying because
a lot of people mischaracterize me that way.
That's fine. What I wanted to bring home here is that you and Matt Dillahunty are presupposing the same thing. Basically,
cosmos. Please explain. Please elaborate.
Yeah, cosmos, universe, the starting point, it just is. Versus starting with creator God, Christian God.
But that's almost like saying like you and Matt Dillahunty are saying one and the same thing. Y'all just express it differently.
Yes. Right. In my worldview, that is what's happening. Correct.
It may be the case. I can't argue that. I the only way I can argue that is that, when I talk about mystical experience, I'm referring to what, the Johns Hopkins, like Dr. Roland Griffiths, what they specifically William James work, like this collapse of the subject-object dichotomy. What Matt is talking about is like real good blues music, fucking Frisson.
I'm not saying that your complexities are the same or the interest in talking to you is the same. I'm not saying that. I'd much rather talk to you. What I'm saying is fundamentally, you guys have the same.
Yeah. I won't deny that. I won't deny. Because I've thought about that, a lot. Like I get on Clubhouse a lot. One of my favorite speakers is his name's Alfonso. He's a materialist, atheist, and him and I we share everything to a T, except that he's an atheist and I'm a theist. And so I thought man, it may just come down to a semantic argument.
Well, I agree, and that's why I've gone in this direction of wanting to get at the fundamental foundation.
Yeah, and I was telling you earlier, the yin yang, you can't have the yin without the yang. The yin yang can also represent atheism, theism, and or free will, no free will. Ultimately, they're one and the same thing. I can see that. I think that's ultimately the case, man. I just don't know how to articulate it.
They're the same thing. Good and evil are the same, right? Woe to those who call evil good and good evil.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there.
That's crazy.
That's it, man. Shit. You convinced me, man. I mean, the thing is, I think the art is trying to articulate that, and it's so difficult to do that. And I'm gonna spend the rest of my days attempting to do that, but no, you convinced me, man, because that's it's invariably what I always come to, is that despite all these differences, it becomes one. It's the same essence.
Who has convinced you?
No, I'm talking about myself. I forget the name of this Greek philosopher, but he said, he was saying that, the forms are different, but the consciousness is the same. He was talking about species, it doesn't matter if it's the grasshopper, the tree, the monkey, the human being, the essence is the same. The forms are different.
You're talking about Plato.
Yeah. Even the Hindus say nama rupa, name and form. And so, yeah, man, I mean, shit, that may be it, man. And, I love this discussion, and yeah, that's what I got out of it, man. That's the thing I've been coming to lately. And I think I really need to dissect that a little bit more. because I definitely don't know how to wordify that shit. And you know, I would love to understand that a little bit better. But man, it's been lovely talking to you, man. I don't know if you are tired, you got to go right now, but if you have anything else, I will. You know, I could say anything, but man, I think you pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate the conversation too. I've been getting on here almost every day of trying to get into these presuppositional discussions. So, you know, you can come back and talk about it if you want.
No, I would love to, man. I would love to have a conversation with you and Alfonso, my friend on Clubhouse, man. You fuck with Clubhouse or no?
No, but maybe you can come over here, or we can do something on YouTube.
Yeah, maybe I can invite Alfonso to your platform, man.
Yeah, I could do. You know, I could. Like today, I was just focusing on materialism, atheism, universalism. Other days, I might focus on.
Yeah. I mean, shit, dude. I gotta give it to you, man. You've been very calm. You've been like, man, you know, you've been infinitely patient. You know, you're, you know, a rare commodity that I've encountered, like for sure. Because, man, dude, I mean, like if you saw, I mean, I'll post it in the private chat, my encounter with Matt Delante, but every single time I met with this guy, he fucking just hung up on my ass and started cursing and all that shit. But you know, that's not to say I caught into like Truth Wanted and other shows, and they greeted me with total respect. Like I told you, Aaron Raw invited me to his channel. Like, you know, it went really well.
Okay. I'll tell you where you need to go if you want to get more on my level. But it's going to be brutal. It's not going to be calm and
go for it, man.
Courteous. Is you got to go over to Jim Bob, made by Jim.
Oh, I've talked to Jim Bob too.
Okay, that's the guy you want to go to. Every time I listen to him, like I don't have the same style. I don't want to play like the ridicule and insults, but like his philosophy.
Me and Jim Bob have gotten into it too, man.
Yeah, because he's going to call you.
I like that guy. He's cool. He's cool in my book.
He's gonna give you trouble for the mysticism, right? Like, oh, what are you saying? What are you talking about?
Do you follow his Instagram art page?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. My favorite one. He has like it's like a atheist is wearing that T-shirt with the A that you know, that stereotypical A symbol. Yeah. And there's a girl looking down at her phone casually, and she looks up. And she says, "Hey, I like your gay pride T-shirt."
Yeah,
man, I love that, dude. And so I love this motherfucker. Yeah, Jim Bob's fucking cool. My name's Jimmy too. So like,
okay,
yeah, Jim Bob. I really like Jim Bob.
There's a recent one where he went on with some of the atheists that are in this community. I think it was like Answers in Atheism.
Oh, you're talking about Speed of Sound, Michael.
That episode was good because I've encountered some of those guys, and he just went in and like tore them up.
Oh,
he went too far though. You know, he goes too far.
Yeah, he's an old friend, dude. Yeah, I was invited to his channel too, man. Let me show you what I've done. Let me see if I can pull it up. I'll show you what I've done, man.
I mean, I don't mind playing a clip if you want.
Oh, okay. All right. Let me see. IV2 I'll show you some shit. It's allcause.html. Oh, I got it. Yeah. Check it out. Check this one out. Put this one up.
Okay. You can share it or private chat.
Private chat. I put it in the private chat. I'm actually real familiar with you know, I know how to make websites, and I work for Google, by the way. I don't know if I told you that, but
you do.
Yeah. And so I made this website containing all the interactions I've had with these guys. And if you click it, one of them is Speed of Sound, the guy you're talking about.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, Mike. And
I see it.
Yeah, Speed of Sound, Gravity. Yeah, he used to go by Speed of Sound.
Yeah, he's. I mean, I've talked to him too a couple times. He's a condescending guy. So Jim Bob was brutal to him, and I kind of felt bad for him. But then I remembered the way that he is. Like, he's always making fun of people that he talks to and making fun of believers. So I guess he kind of got a dose of what he's been doing with Jim Bob.
Yeah, sorry about that. I
That's
got
cool.
too carried away right there. Yeah, so you see all this stuff. I talked to Tracy Harris. I talked to Matt Dillahunty. You see a whole list of people I've addressed.
Yeah, it's pretty thorough. It's good.
Yeah, man. I told you, man. I've been on these topics for a while. Yeah, that's why I find Alfonso real interesting, and he kind of like, his where I led with him is kind of where you kind of showed me is like, man, it comes down to this like semantic argument, man. Like we're ultimately saying one and the same thing, and just
No, but we're not though. I don't know. You said you're concluding that from our conversation. I'm not. I don't know what you're saying because I'm not in agreement with you at all.
all right.
I'm not.
I feel that way. I feel that. I'll say I feel that way.
I'm being. I don't know. I'm trying to be gracious about it, but I think it's still absurdity. You're just pitching me a personal experience, and you're not really telling me anything about justification.
Well, I mean, okay, it's not about justifying someone else's personal experience. The whole point is for you to have it for yourself.
I'm not talking with you about personal experiences. I'm talking to you about worldviews, the perspective that we bring with us everywhere we go. Why things are the way they are. Why things work the way they do.
Well, I mean, that's the basis for at least for me. Like
I'm saying, you have the same fundamental worldview as Matt Dillahunty, not in the atheist perspective, but in the arbitrary perspective. You're just saying,
okay.
Down to it just
see the page, right? Okay, you want to go to one? Go to the 2019.
It doesn't. Oh, I can click on these. Oh, okay, yeah.
2019. Phil Session, Matt, 2019.
Oh, I didn't know you could click.
Yeah, man, they're links.
All right, that's cool, man. Good job. Let me see.
I can do a lot more than that, man. But the AI is fucking crazy.
Well, the thing is because a lot of people will give a lot of airtime to the mysticist because it's interesting. But the problem when you encounter the presupposition list is that they're going to always want to go back to the justification.
Well, go to 2019. Tell me what you think.
Click on that. Which Jim Bob should have done with you. I'm interested in listening to what you did with him.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Jim Bob.
Jimmy in San Antonio. Thanks for waiting. You're on with Matt and Phil. Is Jimmy there?
Yeah, I didn't think you were going to take me the first call. Hey, what's up, guys? I spoke to
the first caller
a year ago. I don't know if you remember my call. Both of you actually.
Don't be disappointed, but I don't remember it yet. But it's possible I'll remember it in a minute.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had mentioned the studies going in Baltimore, Maryland, with psilocybin-induced, what these neuroscientists are calling mystical experience. And anyway, we got in. I think you were talking about how you were addressing what Jordan Peterson was saying during that last call.
Well, that wouldn't have been a year ago, but.
Or less than a year, probably.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, have you looked into the research? And before the call ended, you told me that you would look into it. And I just wondered if you ever bothered looking into that research.
Probably not to the extent that I should. But what I did discover after both your call and the interaction with Jordan is that the label mystic experience is not well defined, and it is a self-reported label. So basically somebody is describing the experience as mystical, and it's more.
No, I had corrected that the last time. You had that same misconception the last time. None of the volunteers in the study described the experience as mystical. This is a term.
Okay, then what's the justification for saying?
He's asking you for justification. I love it. Awesome. You censored the Coke?
Well, I mean, I could tell you right here, like he was trying to say that the people in the study were calling their experience mystical experience, which is not the case.
But doesn't it boil down to the same thing though, conceptually?
No, because the volunteers don't call their experience mystical experience. They're only going to explain what they experience.
I know, but isn't the idea and the concept still there?
I mean, you could say that, but here's the main point, though. The professionals have a gauge that they use to deem their volunteers whether they have a gauge for what constitutes a mystical experience. And if they meet the criteria, then they will deem that volunteer, okay, this volunteer had a mystical experience. That's only done by the professionals, not the volunteers. The volunteers can't say like, oh, you gave me fucking substances. Now I had a mystical experience. It's not up to the volunteers.
Still based on a some sort
it's based on a criteria
that's created.
Yeah, it's based on the criteria,
right?
And, and they let me fucking like really lay out the criteria right here.
Okay.
If you
Somebody took drugs and had a mystical experience if they didn't say they had a mystical experience.
Well, I don't know if you ever look into like neurotheology, for instance. They're trying to say, or the proponents of this neuroscience are trying to say that there's neurological and evolutionary basis for subjective experience traditionally categorized as spiritual or religious.
So that's where we have to pause.
Okay. And so
that's where we have to pause.
Sure.
Traditionally classified as mystical or spiritual.
Yeah.
That still doesn't give any edification to what it means. Yeah. And by the way, that would be self-reported.
Well, in other words, they're trying to describe it as it's not necessarily something induced by the psychedelic. They see it as a feature of consciousness itself. It's something
that's an unfalsifiable proposition. If you take drugs and have an experience, you cannot say, I see this as something not induced by the drugs. You can't demonstrate that it wasn't induced.
No, that's what these researchers are claiming, that the induced psilocybin experience looks virtually identical to naturally.
That's an interesting point, that the drug itself isn't what's bringing it on. It's releasing something that's already
it's a
part of
catalyst.
you.
Yeah, it's a catalyst.
The occurring reported mystical experience.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you said reported mystical experience after we spent several minutes arguing about whether or not it was reported mystical. I want to know, I don't know if we went through this last time, but somebody says, I had an experience, either they or someone else labels it as mystical, and I still don't know what that means or how they determined that it wasn't drug-induced.
That's what I recall about the call, as far as why use that term, like mystical, like what does that actually mean, and what does that actually signify in the conversation?
So somebody has an experience. So hang on 1 second. Somebody has an experience. Some of them are on drugs and they have an experience. Some of them are not on drugs and they have an experience. This is I fully accept this. When I was in church, I would feel an experience that I would describe at the time as the Holy Spirit. I came later to understand that I had no justification for calling it that. It was just that everybody around me seemed to have similar experiences, and they all called it an experience of the Holy Spirit. And then I found out there's no justification for that. So now when people tell me they have a spiritual or mystical experience, I want to know what it is that they're talking about and what's the justification for using that language.
Okay, so it's been defined all the way back to the early work of William James, and I think what they're
just define it. I don't need a history lesson.
Okay, so I mean, if you look into the research, it's pretty elaborately defined. It's a pretty much scientific concept at this point.
No, it's fucking not. No, it's not.
Would you mind sharing that actual definition?
Sure.
That at least start there, at the very least.
I can tell you what happened. People reported having experience that they described as mystical, and scientists went in and said, hey, let's try and figure out what this is.
No, not exactly. No, like I said, none of the volunteers described their experience.
Oh my gosh. All right, let me try this again, Jimmy.
Okay.
For millennia, people had experiences that they would describe as mystical or supernatural. And at some point, some scientists said, hey, there's a lot of people reporting these sorts of experiences. Let's investigate to figure out what they are. You don't think that's how else would scientists begin investigating?
So
okay.
In other words, they're recognizing a phenomenon in consciousness.
No. Yeah. So that's the problem. There are people who think they are recognizing a phenomenon, and they may be, but what they're really doing is investigating a reported phenomenon.
How's he ever going to distinguish the two?
Yeah, I tried to get to it, man. They let me list all the 6 characteristics. If you want to check it out, dude, they let me go through all 6 that constitute what the professionals call a complete mystical experience. Meaning like a full blown or full spectrum mystical experience. And they go through them, man. If you look at it, man, they actually go through them.
All right.
Put it that way if you like it, but I think it's a bit more established than that. I could try to describe it if you like, because
I've been asking for a definition and a description, and all I get is going back to William James.
Sure. So the way they describe it is by 6 features of the experience that manifest in what they call a complete mystical experience. And
I apologize, Jimmy. Your phone is breaking up very badly. Nobody can understand it, so you might want to try one more time.
Let me see if I can go aside real quick. Let me see.
So there are six criteria that have been defined as a complete mystical experience. Defined by who?
Yes. So the original definition was laid down by William James, and it's been refined since then throughout decades through by.
Sure. Is that from Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds?
Pause it, dude. Pause it.
Yeah.
Extraordinary Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, dude. I don't know why the fuck he said that, dude. But the fucking author, William James, it's the varieties of religious experience, man. I don't know how you get those confused, man. That's why I think Matt doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, dude.
Well, did he just add that in to be condescending?
I have no idea, but I think he was trying to sound like he was familiar, but he really wasn't, man. Like that's a completely different author, a completely different book. I've read the entirety of that fucking book, and you know what I mean? Like, there's no way you can confuse those two. Like, that's why I was like, man, what the fuck? How the fuck did he say that? Yeah. Anyway, play it, man.
Yeah.
For you mean in William James' work? I think it's the varieties of religious.
Varieties of religious experience. Okay, cool. I got it. I got those confused.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
He's brushing
and
off.
So the where they're at now is
maybe he just wanted to bring that book up, even though he didn't really think that was the one.
I don't know, man. I've been trying to question that myself. I'm like, if I ever met him personally, I would ask him, like, why did you say that? Like, how do you confuse those two? I would never confuse those two.
I think it's like one of those on purpose mistakes. He wanted to bring up delusion.
Maybe that's what my brother said. Yeah, go ahead.
The 6 criteria. The first one I was mentioning, the unity. They describe it as interconnectedness of people and all things. All is one, or pure consciousness. But this is like the collapse of the subject-object duality we experience in our experience. The next one is a sacredness or reverence towards a majesty that's also experienced. The third one they go by is a noetic quality, a sense of encountering what they describe in these studies as ultimate reality. But of course, these are the limitations. This is where the limitations of these measures meet the descriptions of the volunteers' experience. Not even the measures can really gauge what they're trying to express.
Yes,
I can understand.
That's why it's not science. But we can still. Somebody can say, I'm experiencing pain. And if you're going to try and go through and create a good methodology for that, you're going to talk to them about, describe the type of pain that you are feeling. Is it a burning pain, a stabbing pain, a throbbing pain, et cetera? Then you're also going to try to give an approximation of the intensity of that. And with a single individual, you get nothing. You've reached no conclusion. So you begin expanding that. The problem is what I may think is a 9 in pain, Phil might only think is a 4. And so you have to find a way to normalize for those things. Now, when it comes to,
and I think
I'm not done.
I think that's what they're doing.
I'm not. Okay. But
go ahead.
So you've got these 6 categories that create a complete mystical experience. I've got 2 of them so far. But the thing is, what if somebody only has like 2 or 3 of them? Is that still a mystical experience, just not a complete?
I think that's why they, in the peer-reviewed studies, they put mystical type, because they do occur on a spectrum. And yes, not everyone has the complete.
So we've got unity and sacredness. What are the other 4?
Noetic quality is the one I mentioned. That was the third one.
I still don't know what that is.
I had already mentioned it. It's the one where people have
But I'm saying I don't know what the first word was.
noetic quality. William James used this because he felt these experiences had a certain intuition about them that were people, they presented itself as ultimate truth.
I still don't know what the first word is.
Oh, noetic? N-O-E-T.
N-O-E-T, okay. For some reason, I was hearing noetic as if we are under the noetic covenant. And I was like, surely they didn't go religious specific. Okay, noetic quality, go, what's for?
All right, and then deeply felt positive mood, which is expressed as universal joy, love, or peace. This is a literal impression of unconditional love within a temporary, state of consciousness. The fifth one is transcendence of space and time, past and present, collapse into the present moment. And, people will say things like they felt like they've transcended time and space.
Yes, I've been high. I get it. What's the sixth one?
Ineffability or paradoxicality. Like one of the first things people say while coming out of this experience is, I can't possibly put that into words. And of course, these researchers follow along these volunteers for months and months. And eventually they do get to a point where they can say something about it. They can give somewhat of a description. So it doesn't remain.
What's the sixth one?
In that sense. I'm sorry?
What's the sixth one? I've got 5.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I think that was it. The unity, sacred, noetic quality, deeply felt positive mood, transcendence, time and space, and ineffability.
And then what? After transcending time and space?
Ineffability and paradoxicality.
Okay, wait, pause, Jimmy, because we're just talking to you.
Sure.
After transcending space and time, what was the next one?
Ineffability and paradoxicality. I said one of the first
ineffability. Okay.
Yes.
Their inability to express what they experience in words.
Yeah, like one of the first, like your initial reaction is you have no words.
Yeah, I can summarize all this. People have experiences that they don't understand and can't explain.
Well, no, I think they are beginning to, the science is beginning to understand these type of experiences. And, they found many things. I mean, this research is already on its 17th year at Johns Hopkins, and it's prompted research all over the world. And, of course, they go beyond this measure that I just used. They have multiple questionnaires. They have other ways to assess to attempt to assess what's going on. They also couple this with fMRI.
I get it. But at the end of the day, the only thing that science can conclude is that people had experiences and now we have some language to describe them. Science cannot confirm that the experiences are in any way supernatural.
Well,
how is science going to confirm supernatural, by the way?
Yeah, that's what I got him on about, man, because every time these topics come up, man, I think atheists have this notion that supernatural must be necessarily fucking tied to these topics, man. And whenever I ask, what do you mean by supernatural? Magic, something that defies the laws of physics. And when you actually look into these studies, they define them in no such way, man. These are naturally occurring experiences. They see them as they're hardwired into our genetic makeup, man. So yeah, I really don't get that. And
well,
so
I'm saying if he's coming from a empirical standpoint and he's studying the natural world, how is he going to ever conclude something is supernatural?
I agree. And so when I questioned him right here, I said, "What do you mean by supernatural?" It's he said, "I don't know." Check it out. Just play.
So he just throws out anything that's not.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to tell you, man. This dude doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
I wouldn't necessarily, if you mean by supernatural.
I mean, here for clarity, Jimmy, there is currently no path to confirm in any way the existence of the supernatural or that the supernatural can in fact impact reality.
There's no natural explanation for the supernatural. He thinks that's a
straw man. It's not even.
It's a category error.
Yeah, it's a category error.
You discover supernatural through natural methodology.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Oh my God, dude. Hell yeah.
In any way. So at best, until there's a path to be able to identify, confirm, and explain what a supernatural cause is, the best that science can ever do, the best that science can ever do is say, hey, a bunch of people are having these experiences, and this is the language that they typically use to describe it, and these are the kind of feelings that they have. But you can't go further than that. You can't say, oh, these are coming from, oh my God.
Yeah, because I'm even looking at the actual 6 looking at the 6 pieces here, when you're saying that all the time, past, future, and present is collapsed into one, I'm not sure exactly how you would even go about trying to measure that in the first place, especially if you're only relying on the experiences of what people say that they had.
Yeah, it's a universal reported aspect. Like
Universal reported.
Yes, Jimmy. Everybody who has smoked weed has felt time dilation.
Well, no, we're not talking about time dilation. We're talking about a literal impression in consciousness where there is no time.
Okay. Hey, Jimmy, hang on. If I have an impression in my consciousness that there is no space and time, am I right?
Well, whether you're right or wrong is irrelevant to the fact that this is universally reported, you know?
Okay, and Jimmy, then I guess we've entered an area where I literally do not give a fuck about people reporting things that they can't describe, where we have no way to tell whether or not it's true or what's true about it.
No, I think there is ways, but I think you're asking the wrong questions, especially by mentioning supernatural. Supernatural, the way I hear most atheists define supernatural is that which defies the laws of physics. I don't know if you abide by that definition.
I don't know what supernatural is because nobody's ever demonstrated, but it seems to be an assertion that something is not natural in origin.
There he goes again. No one's ever demonstrated.
Yeah, he's
empirically that there's
keeps on appealing to that. Yeah.
So, I mean, these researchers have concluded that these experiences are indeed biologically normal, that there is nothing
that they occur in people
natural about them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why are we talking about it at all? Why are we talking about it at all?
So they've also they consider these experiences the evidence of I don't know if you've heard of perennial philosophy. So they find them in accordance with the perennial philosophy. In other words, they can be recognized throughout all the major religions. Each of the major religions have the word to describe the experience.
So
like, for instance,
is the point that you're getting to that science, by investigating this, is disproving all religions that appeal to the supernatural?
No, I'm saying they're recognizing that this phenomenon, which is associated with mysticism, the mystical experience, is at the root of all the major religions. No,
first of all, it's not at the root of all the major religions, but when you say they're recognizing that this mysticism, as soon as you say that they recognize that this mysticism is natural, then that eliminates all of the religions that claim that it's supernatural, right?
Sure, but I don't know of any religion that doesn't that claims any supernatural in the sense of
Are you kidding me? You don't think God and the Holy Spirit are supernatural? You don't think Allah is supernatural? You don't think that?
No, not if you look into the original meanings of these terms. If you look into the original etymology, no.
Okay, then we are at a fundamental disagreement about the history of religion and what people have believed about it. Because if you walk into churches and synagogues and mosques around the world and say, hey, all of you people, your religion was never originally about anything supernatural at all.
Wait, Jimmy, you're saying that Holy Spirit is natural?
I mean, yes, like that's what the neuroscientists are saying.
Material?
Well, okay, it's kind of tricky to talk about it in words because, like, it's a natural phenomenon, but inside the perspective of that phenomenon, like here we're talking about it, right? But if you're in the vantage point of actually experiencing it, the person that's undergoing the phenomenon is experiencing something that they may call, transcendental. Like for them, their perception has been altered and transformed in such a way that, like I said, all time and past and future has collapsed into the moment, even though this is a very natural phenomenon. So I think that's why people get it confused. Like people overlook that and they think it's like, despite the fact that it's a natural phenomenon, nevertheless, from the vantage point of having this phenomenon occur, you're gonna have this impression of this transcendence. You know what I mean? And I think that's what people call supernatural.
You can't rule out that there's an there's interaction from the spirit world or something immaterial, even though you can't locate the immaterial.
I think that's why it's hard to talk about. Like,
well, if you're staying within the domain of science, you can't locate the immaterial aspect of it.
Sure, but I mean, like, man, if you look into these studies, dude, they can't, like, whether they're atheist, agnostic, or religious, like, they're gonna reach for a vocabulary like, it was beyond dimensionality. I felt like it was like I was perceiving into the fourth dimension, or I was one with Brahman. I had the Holy Spirit. It doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what angle you come at it from. Like, people are going to describe it in such a way, that even though it's a very natural phenomenon in consciousness. Like, I think people conflate these things. Like, it's a natural phenomenon. Yet, when people undergo it, in the phenomenon of actually undergoing it, they experience this sense of transcendence, like, and I mean that's really what it boils down to, in my opinion.
All right.
They're going to laugh you out of there because God as a creator must, by definition, exist outside of space and time.
No, I think that's a misconception. I think by people reading the writings of mystics who had this experience of being outside of space and time, attributed it to a creator that's outside of space and time.
So what you're saying, now this is okay. Go ahead.
It's an anthropomorphizing of the writings of mystics. In other words, they misinterpreted these scriptures that were originally written by people who had these types of experiences.
Which means that all religions all modern religions that appeal to the supernatural are wrong, is what you're saying. That their origins didn't start there. These guys added on to it in a way that shows that it's not true.
I think you're assuming that supernatural has to be intrinsically tied to religion.
I'm saying,
I don't think it does.
Jimmy, do people actively engaged in modern religions believe that those religions have supernatural causes at their foundation?
Not all of them.
No, okay, correct. We can find the couple of people who don't, but by and large, do not most people, let's just stick with the Abrahamic religions to start with.
But by and large, George Carlin said most people are effing dumb. Like, there's a lot of naive.
Okay, you don't have to say effing on the show. You can just say fuck.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't care what George. Jimmy, this is mind-numbingly frustrating. Oh my God.
Majority.
What?
Neither are the opinions of the people that are having this experience. All it is even if they do test to actually see the biological markers, to actually study the brain as these experiences are happening, as Matt said before, all that they can confirm is that these experiences are happening, that they're having some type of experience, but that has no indication onto what a cause is. That gives no evidence as to what that cause might be, except for, as far as we can tell, it's.
How is the atheist justifying causality from their worldview?
Yeah, I know, right? You should call in, man.
They smuggle in
the biological process that we can measure.
Jimmy, I desperately want to know what your point is.
Well, like I said, this research at Johns Hopkins is on its 18th year, but it's building on earlier research that
Jimmy, I desperately want to know what your point is.
Well, here's my point: that there's been, very thorough exegetical work and hermeneutics on the scriptures of the major religions that have found they're using the same measures that they're using in these studies, and they sifted through the scriptures to find what they're calling the reported mystical experience. So basically, the reported mystical experience is virtually identical to what they're inducing in their volunteers. They find no distinction there, and so they're recognizing it as a phenomenon in consciousness that has been happening for millennia, a la the perennial philosophy. So that's what the research is hinting at, and some of the professionals involved will flat out just call the mystical experience itself the very evidence for the perennial philosophy.
Yeah, I still don't know what your point is.
Well, how about, would you ever consider they talked about the possibility of recruiting confirmed atheists to sign up at Johns Hopkins for these studies. Would you ever consider it, Matt?
Of course, and so have others, and none of that fucking matters. That's the point. Here's the thing, Jimmy. You're saying people have reported having these experiences that they described as mystical. But the scientists have investigated, and they've checked out people who are on hallucinogens and other drugs, and they'll have similar experiences to... okay, this is something that I talked about decades ago, or a decade and a half ago on the show, talking about how I would experience all of these things that I would have called the Holy Spirit. And then after I left my religion, I found that I could have similar quality of experiences through music, art, drugs, etc. And so,
sure, but you're still
oh my God, interrupt me one more time, Jimmy. I swear we're done.
He's so nasty.
I know, man.
To have Holy Spirit experiences and then other ways to have experiences similar doesn't mean that you can't have had a Holy Spirit.
It's what I was trying to tell you earlier, that he's trying to describe frisson right now. He's trying to describe like listening to like music, like the goosebumps, like your hair raising. You know what I mean? That's not what the fuck any of these professionals are talking about when they talk about mystical experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a method he tries to use to minimize things. If you have an experience,
it's a way to undermine it. Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
So I got to this realization that if I can't tell the difference between a mystical experience that is caused by a drug or art or whatever, and a mystical experience that's caused by God, then I have no justification for believing that there is a God causing a mystical experience. This was
if he can't discern one from the other, then he can't justify God.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. And you're going to see that clearly, dude. After he hangs up on my ass, you're going to see him turn to Phil, and they're going to go after, they're going to review the 6 characteristics, and they can't identify with a single one, dude, because they've never had this phenomenon. Yeah, go ahead, man. Shit.
No-brainer that I didn't have to do an 18-year study on. At the end of this study, at most they're going to say, hey, there's a bunch of people having experiences. We seem to be unable to distinguish between people who are having experiences in a religious context, people who are having experience in a drug context, on any meaningful ground. And it appears that the best we can conclude is that this is natural in origin. It's about the human brain and the human brain's response to chemicals and the human brain's response to groupthink and conformity and all of those things. But at the end of the day, you have not disproved religion, because you can't rule out the possibility that there is a God who also gives mystical experiences that are indistinguishable from the other. And you also haven't proven religion. So this is why you end up going down this thing of, wow. Okay. I don't know what that was, but you get on this road of saying, the exegetical hermeneutics looking at scripture have concluded that, hey, there were mystics reporting these experiences, and they were misunderstood, and that's the origin of religion. And I will put it to you that of the people I know who have actively studied the history and origin of religions, that is a gross oversimplification. It is certainly one possibility of many of how different religions arose, but to say that that is the origin of religions is simply something that you can't demonstrate, because we have to go back all the way to mysticism and animism. We have to go back to, here's a gregarious leader who is giving a set of instructions with no mysticism attached, and then later something mystical comes into it. But the thing is, when we look at, for example, the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's the very first verse. It began it all, and it is clearly a statement, and unless you just want to write it off as metaphor, of a supernatural event.
I believe all the early mystics did write it off as analogy and metaphor. They interpret them.
Prove it. I don't care what you believe. The ancient mystics did.
You need to comparative religion.
Yes.
I studied comparative religion as a hobby. And you could look into the Cappadocian fathers, the Hesychus, ascetics. They all interpret religion by metaphor and analogy.
Okay. I'm glad you have an opinion. Thank you.
All right, man. Well, I just asked that you look into it, man. That's all.
Jesus Christ, Jimmy, I have spent the bulk of my life in detail studying religion. You know what else I've studied?
Oh, how about?
You know what else I've studied? You know what else I've studied? Epistemology.
Studying. How about considering having one of the experiences, then really judge?
Hey, jackass, did you not hear me tell you that while I was in church, I had those experiences, and then I also had them outside of church? You're gone.
Nice.
He spent a long time studying epistemology, but
I know, man.
His worldview starts with "it just is."
Man,
no
dude.
epistemic justification. So that's interesting.
I remember the day he converted on Atheist Experience, dude. And I was knee deep in comparative religion, dude. Long before he even fucking touched his finger on trying to study religion, man. And man, yeah, if you listen to this part right here, dude, he's gonna turn to Phil Session, and they're gonna go over the characteristics, dude. And neither of them can identify. And you know that, I mean, like, what more proof do you need, man? Like, you know, like shit, dude.
Here's a thought. Why don't you try having one of those experiences? Okay. Here's a thought. Call another show.
Well, it doesn't matter what experience you have. He's just going to dismiss it, right? There's nothing that can happen. It's like when you ask,
it's an ego thing.
You ask him, okay, what will convince you God exists? He'll say, if the stars align and it spells my name in the sky, then I'll be convinced. And you'll say, no, you're
I saw that debate too. Hell yeah.
Right.
And don't get me wrong. By the way, this would be a good time to bring up something. Yes, I got on Jimmy about interrupting, and people will point out that I interrupt more than anybody. And you're probably right. And I'll be doing a video at some point that kind of talks about the how and the why. But it comes from 14 and a half years of this show, where if you let somebody talk for 5 minutes and then you try to challenge the first thing they said, what you get is, that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant. And then you get another 5-minute rabbit trail, which is why I wanted to get to point. What was Jimmy's point? Was he trying to say that science is effectively disproving the supernatural aspect? Because here's the thing about the supernatural. Not only can you not prove it currently, you certainly can't disprove it. It's an unfalsifiable proposition. There's no way to test or investigate. When I say that not only have I studied comparative religions, and I've also studied epistemology, that's where we get into the science. That's where we get into, how do we know what we know? And so you can make reasonable inferences. You can have really good abductive arguments that go arguing towards the best explanation. And all of science's positions are tentative and should be weighted proportionally to the evidence. That's it. So when you say you should go out and have one of those experiences, Jimmy, you just showed me that you don't have a clue what you're talking about. Because not only have I had those experiences, but going out and having one of those experiences tells me nothing at all about what that experience was. If I'd never had anything that I described as the presence of the Holy Spirit, if I'd never felt that, and tomorrow I went out and had that experience, I don't know how I would do that, since, at least according to some religious family members, God will choose when and where he reveals himself to you. But even if I went out and had that tomorrow, I can't tell you what it is. And I would be prone, as most human beings are, to saying, wow, that seems like it might be supernatural. I would then acknowledge that I have no way of knowing that, no way to investigate, etc. But that's the reason that most people in most religions buy into the supernatural. But if you tell me, why don't you go have that experience? Okay, first of all, I already had, but let's find somebody who never has. Let's pick two people, two atheists, to go do this study. Two, what was it, affirmed atheist or whatever?
Oh, was it?
I don't know what the language was, but it was snarky bullshit. So let's pick two of them. Let's pick somebody who's never been. Both of them have never been religious in their entire life. They've never had these experiences, and you put them both in the study. And one of them has an experience that is of the qualities that are described, and the other one doesn't. What do you know now?
That people have experiences that they can't explain.
Hey, let's imagine that neither of them have an experience. What do you know now? What if they both have an experience? What do you know now? The test methodology is flawed for you to say, just go have the experience. Why study epistemology?
It's not that it's flawed. It's that the whole experiment encompasses more than science. It encompasses
the whole premise lies upon it. Yeah, like if you want to have a podium to speak upon it, you gotta have, you gotta have a vantage point to speak from, and the experience is necessary. And right here, if you don't mind, like, man, dude, I love that you're watching this with me. Dude, right here, he's going to turn to Phil and he's going to start listing the characteristics. If you don't mind pressing play, dude.
Yeah.
Why study the science? Why study the methods by which we go about and determine whether or not our beliefs are reasonable? Just go have the experience. Experience is the thing unexamined that is most likely to lead you astray.
See, but he says science determine whether things are reasonable. That's not true.
Yeah, it's a scientism. Yeah,
it's right. It's philosophy that he keeps smuggling in philosophy. He does it all the time.
Because while we are great machines at inferring, and today is pretty much like yesterday, and what I know about the world is probably going to change very little day to day, I'm good at getting by in that context. But I, like everybody else, am bad at saying, here's what the truth is, with no investigation, just an experience. If you used that methodology of go have the experience, you would believe every optical illusion, every audio illusion, every thing that appears deceptive, the mirage out in the desert. You would just, oh, I had this experience. I know what I saw. No, you don't know what you saw. You know that you saw something. You know that you experienced something. You don't know what it was until you investigate and confirm it. And the fact that people are having experiences they describe as mystical. Let's go through the 6.
Yeah.
Unity. The notion that everything is one, that we are all one. I have never actually had that specific experience.
Mm-hmm.
Have you?
No.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
I know people who have. Now, the notion of the sacred. Mm-hmm. I've certainly felt that something was sacred in probably this complete mystical context. Noetic quality. Possibly. I don't know how specific. A positive feeling of love. Yes.
Unconditional love, I think he said.
Yeah, I think the notion of unconditional love is a big fat lie. I recognize that there are people, to me, it's kind of in the same ballpark as like soulmates. Mm. First of all, I don't think there's any reason to think there's a soul, but I find it patently ridiculous that there's one person out there who's your everything. And I know people who've been married for 60, 70 years, and it's great, cool, good for them. But it's really convenient. And this is actually an argument people have used for gods. Mm-hmm. It's really convenient that most people find their soulmate where they work or in their town or through a friend. So God is manipulating your friends and your work to find your soulmate. But then somebody else finds their soulmate in Bangladesh and they started something online. So basically God is manipulating the internet and directing you to the right searches to find your soulmate. And then 50% of the people who find their soulmate end up divorced.
Well, then all that means they just found the wrong person. They followed the wrong path, of course.
So if you can be wrong about who your soulmate was the first time and the second time, and I mean, Elizabeth Taylor was wrong a lot. It seems far more plausible to me that we have the capacity to love a great many people and to connect and have different people in our lives.
Sure.
And that it's going to happen to different extents. There are people that I care about more than others because they're close to me, because they have value. And then there's caring for humanity at large. So this feeling of unconditional love, I would say, I would be kind of opposed to anybody claiming that was in any way true. Mm-hmm. But I can't rule that out. Maybe some people do feel that.
Mothers feel that.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. I mean, shit, he's denying unconditional love, dude. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Transcending space and time. Not just the time dilation of weed, sorry, but you have to think that you're completely out of space and time. I think that is an obvious lie and deception as well, because you have to have that thought, and that thought takes time. Mm-hmm. Just saying it or experiencing it is necessarily temporal. So you should know, the second you feel that you are no longer connected to space and time, you should know that you are wrong. And it's such an obvious thing too, because we put Phil in the study and we give him a bunch of drugs and we got him in a room. Woo. And now Phil is high as a kite and he's sitting in the room and he's like, I feel completely transcendent of all space and time. And everybody observing this is clear that that's not true.
Yeah.
We've got a camera on you. And just saying, I feel I transcend space and time takes time and has to occur in space or we couldn't hear you.
Yeah, fucking straw man, man.
Not in, in space, nobody can hear you scream. But
yes.
Anyway. And then the ineffability.
Inability to explain, yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that we all have experiences that we can't explain. And that's why we go out and look for an explanation. The problem comes when somebody says, here's something that's unexplainable, and I have explained it. It's God. If you can't explain it, then you can't explain it. But if your explanation is God, then you are claiming that you have explained it. If you're claiming that it's supernatural, if you're claiming that it's chemical induced, all of those are assertions about what the experience is.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've adopted a burden of proof. So if you think you can't both call.
On his worldview, I don't know how you can claim that you can't say it's God. He doesn't really have a worldview that
I agree, man.
And to claim that you can't do that. He just doesn't do that.
Something unexplained and offer an explanation.
And the study, like, I can't imagine that. Like, I don't know what the actual outcome of the study is or what they're trying to look for. But if they're looking for people that have experiences, that's something that you can measure. And that's something that I can see them doing that study to see those. But I don't understand where Jimmy was trying to go with that. All these experiences occur. Cool. Now,
I think I know where Jimmy was going now.
What's the next? Oh, that all religions are justified, or belief in the supernatural is justified based on that these experiences actually do happen, even though you haven't established a cause, just the fact that they do occur.
So Jimmy was listed as a theist, and we still haven't talked about that at some point.
Sure.
If Jimmy calls back, and you're welcome to. I think I have a better understanding of where he was going, because it could be that he was trying to show that science is disproving the mystical aspects of religion. But if you disprove that, what's left? And so he has this particular notion, and I'm going to stop quickly here because he's not on, and I don't want to be unfair, but he has a notion which I've heard before, which is, the mystical and supernatural aspects of religion, we have no reason to think that any of those exist, but there's still some compelling truth in there. So people took these truths and did their best at explaining them because we have this commonality of experience, but that doesn't mean it's supernatural. Mm-hmm. And then I get to, okay, how are you a theist? Which next time Jimmy calls, we'll do that.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
man,
that's
you can
cool, man.
right there if you want, man.
That's cool.
But yeah, you see, man, like I talk to these dudes, man. Like,
Yeah. That's pretty cool. I'd say if you want to come back, I'd like to hear your discussion with Jim Bob, because he speaks my language, and
I would love to talk to Jim Bob, man. We got into it at one point, dude, on Speed's channel, and he refuted a lot of shit that I was like kind of like passively generalizing. I'm like, damn, okay. But it was only because I underestimated his ass. I'm like, damn, okay. I gotta step up my game real quick.
Yeah.
But nah, he's a sharp motherfucker, man.
He is. He's easy to underestimate because he's goofy, but
I like him. I like him.
Well, you don't have anything on the list with him?
I don't, dude. Except for that one interaction I told you about, but it was purely in the chat room. It wasn't like voice. But no, man. I'll reach out to him. I would love to have some of them. Like I told you, that list I sent you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you look at the very bottom of the list, it says Aaron Ra and Aaron Adair or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I went in with Aaron, and I was trying to back up this guy that, man, they were putting him down left and right, dude. I felt bad for him. Like, man, dude, they're just insulting him and all this shit. I'm like, so I came in and I said, I'm gonna back up my boy Jake, and man, and because Aaron tried to say that there's no more NDE studies, like that, that it's a bankrupt enterprise, and so a lot of the scientific researchers have given it up. So I used ChatGPT-4 to look up all the current studies on NDEs, and there's a fuckload. And so like I just listed them all right when I came in out the gate.
Nice.
You know? Yeah. So I was like, nah, Aaron, you're fucking wrong. You know, like you're wrong about this shit. And ChatGPT helped me to the point where at the very end, Aaron's like, hey man, I want to invite you on my channel, and I'm gonna get a neuroscientist, and you know, we'll have this discussion again. You know, I've never had that, dude. Fucking Matt has hung up on me every single time. You know, if you look at the other the other things on the list, you know, it wasn't just atheist experience and the line. If you look
GRR. I've talked to him.
I was on with like S.A. Thomason or the
Stephen
one I really liked.
He's pretty sharp.
Yeah. I really liked. Man, it was. I think. Let me see. Look at the list. It was. Objectively Dan on Truth Wanted. I went on Truth Wanted, and man, dude, they fucking met me with all this love. You know what I mean? Like the only time I was really fucking disdained and put down and fucking hung up on was with Matt. That's the only time.
Yeah.
And it was because, man, if you don't fucking like approach his ego in the right way, he's gonna fucking shut you down.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So like in order to have a conversation with Matt, you have to stroke his ego at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the only way, dude. That's the only way. Because if you don't do that, then that's it. On to the next.
Yeah.
And,
what time are you where you are?
It's 3:34 where I'm at, but man,
Okay.
dude, I'm not going to sleep anytime soon.
It's it's 4:30 here. I was gonna say I probably should get going because I got some stuff.
No. Hey, dude. Hey, I love you, brother, for even playing that, man. You see how that took up like half the episode? Not only until he hung up on me, but all the criticism he made afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that shit doesn't go on your average fucking, episode, man.
Yeah, he seemed interested in you.
Sure. Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. And like, I was in the chat room earlier when he was on live earlier, dude. And I'm waiting for him to chat with me to come up, dude. Cause like, man, like the last time I came on, dude, the second I fucking rubbed his ego wrong, that was it. He didn't even let me make a point. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck's the point if you can fucking call in and you can't fucking say anything? What's the point?
Yeah, he's moody.
Sure. Yeah, he's moody for sure. And so, like, man, considering all that, I'm like, okay, maybe I should fucking call in and fucking just stroke Matt's ego for the fucking hell of it, just to fucking get a word in, But that would be it. That would be it. I've had more pleasure speaking to you than fucking Matt. I'll let you know that, man. Hopefully you don't see Matt as your intellectual hero, man, because he has no grasp on these topics.
I mean, why would I see Matt as an intellectual hero?
A lot of people do, man. A lot of people do.
I'm not an atheist, and I think he's quite silly. I think he's a good speaker. He's aggressive. He's well spoken, but when it comes down to the domain that he's actually in it, which is philosophy, he's a poor philosopher.
You're right about that, man. And it's been a very appreciative pleasure speaking to you, man. I love the fact that you even took the time to display that video, man. I thought that was cool. I'm not only addressed, like, if you see that list, dude, I fucking went after Shannon Q and
why don't you you can come back. I'm usually on about 8 to 12 at night. It's like somewhere at 8 to 12. Almost.
Hey, that's my time. I'm a fucking night out too, man. So
I think you're just an hour behind. So I think it's just 7 to 11.
Yeah, dude, it's been lovely, brother.
We can do another one. I'll do another critique with you.
Man, it would be fucking badass, dude. I would love that shit. And
cool.
Yeah, we can really dive into it, man. Because I really like your criticism on it, man. I really appreciate what you had to say on these things, on these topics.
Yeah, I'll press you on justification and presupposition.
Yeah, please, man. I love to hear that. I love the pushback, man.
All right, we'll do it again. Yeah, Jimmy,
Yeah.
good to meet you, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it was cool, man. It was nice meeting you, brother, man. I'm glad I met you, dude. Man, it was fucking badass. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you next time, man.
All right, man. Peace out, lucid dreams, man, and deja vu, man. And one love, brother. Peace out.
Have a good one. Take care.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right. Just go ahead and end it here then. Thanks for those who are still up watching. That was pretty interesting. We're going to do that again. He's got a nice list of different people that he's talked to here too. See, some people I've talked to. Mike over at Speed of Sound. He's got the Raging Atheist on there. Shannon Q. Steve McRae. Recent one with Aaron Raw. We'll probably take a look at that one. That seems interesting. But he's got about, I don't know, maybe 40 or so conversations here over the years. So it's cool. I like doing critiques. So maybe we'll get someone else on there too next time. But I got to get going here. So thanks to all for coming. Grace and peace. Take care.